off with my usual reminders to help our meeting go smoothly. First, I encourage everyone who's joining by phone or video conference to mute your microphones while others are speaking. Also, I'm going to ask counselors and staff from the system administration offices and the campuses to turn off your video cameras unless you'd like to speak or need to present an item. If after turning on your video you want to be acknowledged to engage in the discussion, just simply raise your hand. For those of you wearing masks, please remember to speak into your microphones loudly and clearly so everybody can hear you. And finally, remember to identify yourself when making comments or asking questions. With that, Jess, please call the roll.
Regent President Peterson.
Here.
Regent Vice President Greeby.
Here.
Regent Atwell. Regent Bechtel.
Here.
Regent Bogus.
Present.
Regent Cologne.
Here.
Regent Delgado.
Here.
Regent Hall.
Here.
Regent Jones.
Here.
Regent Klein. Regent Klein is present. Regent Levzo.
Here.
Regent Manydeeds.
Here.
Regent Peterson. Regent Saffold.
Here.
Regent Stanford Taylor.
Here.
Regent Walsh.
Here.
Regent Weatherly.
Here.
Regent Woodmansee. Regent Woodmansee.
Here.
Regent, thank you. Regent Manydeeds. We have a quorum.
I'm here.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we consider items on today's agenda, are there board members who wish to declare any conflicts of interest regarding today's open session? Regent Jones.
In order to avoid the appearance of conflict of interest, I will recuse myself from discussing or voting on Resolution G in the Business and Finance Committee report.
I would like to join you in recusing myself for item G as well, the UW-Madison agreement with Exact Sciences. Any other regents wish to declare a conflict? Okay, before we get started with today's agenda, I understand that President Thompson has a couple of introductions that he'd like to make. President Thompson, the floor is yours.
I do, and thank you very much, President Peterson. We have several colleagues who are taking on some new roles, and I'd like to introduce them to the board. First, I'm pleased to welcome Grace Cricket, the new Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration at UW-Eau Claire. Grace comes with a great resume, a great work ethic. She comes to Eau Claire from UW-Whitewater, where she served as Vice Chancellor for Administrative Affairs, Chief Business Officer, and Ethics Officer. She also has financial experience in the California higher education system, having served as Associate Vice President for Business Operations at San Francisco State, and also 9 years as Chief Risk Officer for the University of California. Grace has also worked as Senior Vice President for the American Automobile Association of Northern California, Nevada, and Utah. Welcome, Grace. We look forward to working with you in this new role. I'm also very pleased to introduce Taryn Carruthers, the Interim Vice Chancellor for Administrative Affairs at UW-Whitewater. Taryn has been with UW-Whitewater since 2018, serving as Director of Financial Services. Previously, she served in a variety of roles at UW-Platteville, including as Interim Assistant Chancellor for Administrative Services, as well as a faculty member in the School of Business. Earlier in her career, Taryn worked as an auditor and consultant focused on improving the organizations through technology, cost containment, and overall strategy. Welcome, Taryn. We look forward to working with you as well. Back to you, President Peterson, and thank you for letting me have that opportunity.
My pleasure. Welcome again to our new colleagues. We look forward to working with you in your new roles. Congratulations. The records of the August 20th Board of Regents meeting, the September 10th Executive Committee, and the September 25th Special Board meeting of the Regents have been provided. May I seek a motion to approve these records?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Regent Bechtel. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Our records carry. The report of the Wisconsin Technical College System Board has been provided. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll move into my report. I'd like to offer a brief update on the search for our new chancellor at UW-Stevens Point. Last week, UW-Stevens Point students, faculty, staff, and community members had the opportunity to interact directly with each of the 4 finalist candidates in a series of both on-site and virtual public forums. The Search and Screen Committee, chaired by Regent Karen Walsh, met yesterday to review feedback from the campus. Next week, the members of the Special Regent Committee and President Thompson will meet to interview the finalists. We expect the committee's recommendation will be considered by the board in either late October or early November. I also have updates on several areas which have been of considerable interest to this board. First, I'm pleased to share the news that the University of Wisconsin System will host this year's annual conference for the Action Collaborative on Preventing Sexual Harassment in Higher Education, put on by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. This is a big deal. The Action Collaborative is a group of over 60 colleges, universities, and research institutions working to prevent sexual harassment in higher ed. The UW system was the first state public higher education system to join the Action Collaborative as one of its 28 original founding members. The summit, scheduled to be held originally October 19th and 20th, was to be held at UW Milwaukee, but will be taking place virtually this year due to COVID-19. This opportunity underscores the UW system's commitment to being a national leader in efforts to prevent sexual harassment on our campuses and creating an environment where we all feel safe to learn, work, and thrive. I'd like to emphasize the Board of Regents has been a strong supporter of UW system's efforts in this area. As a brief recap for our new colleagues, in 2014, then UW system president Ray Cross called for the creation of the UW System Task Force on Sexual Violence and Harassment, a 2-year investigation of current and best practices for preventing sexual violence and harassment. In 2016, the UW system put forth a comprehensive new Board of Regents sexual assault and harassment policy, codifying the UW system's commitment to addressing the issues and mandating sexual violence and harassment training for all UW system employees and students. In 2018, the UW system instituted groundbreaking new policies on reference checks and the sharing of personal files that aim to prevent the pass the harasser practice. The new policies, unanimously approved by the Board of Regents, require all UW system universities to document in personnel files instances of sexual violence or sexual harassment perpetrated by employees and to share that information with other employers. Our policies attracted significant positive national attention. So we are very proud that the UW system will be hosting this important event. Finally, I'd like to quickly note a change in the reporting structure for the UW system's Office of Compliance and Integrity, which has assumed responsibility over a wider scope of issues in recent months. In line with industry best practices, Chief Compliance Officer Katie Ignatowski will now report directly to System President Thompson. Her office is currently working with the UW system and campus leadership on a proposal to restructure compliance-related activities, as members of the Audit Committee heard this morning. One area of expanded focus will be civil rights investigations and youth protection efforts. Hundreds of thousands of youth visit our campuses each year for pre-college programs. These youth are the future of the UW system, and we need to make sure we are doing everything we can to provide them with a safe and rewarding experience. With that, that concludes my report. I'll now turn it over to President Thompson for his report.
Thank you very much, President Peterson. And also, let me just say at the beginning, congratulations to you and to the whole board for initiating the Action Coalition and being the first university system involved. It certainly shows the tremendous leadership and the vision of this campus. And your leadership, Drew, was amazing, and I congratulate you and the whole board in doing what you've done so far. I'm going to start, ladies and gentlemen, Board of Regents, with an update on our response to COVID-19. I really am very proud of being able to make this report to all of you today. Let me first tell you up front that the results over the past 6 weeks have been greatly encouraging. If you remember back when we started about 6 weeks ago, there were a lot of individuals in this room as well as across the state that didn't believe that we would be able to open up schools safely. And a lot of individuals thought that we would be closing down in about 3 weeks. And today we're in our 6th week going strong. So let me just say congratulations to everybody, including the board, for their leadership. I want to thank the UW operations team here at System, the Board of Regents leadership, as well as the students, the chancellors, the faculty and staff at all of our universities for their commitment to providing the education students deserve and parents expect. Our operation team continues to meet every morning. Today was the first morning we have not met because the Board of Regents was here having your meeting. But every morning we meet at 9:30 upstairs to review the numbers, the trends, and the circumstances at every one of our universities. We're looking at what's already been done. We learn from it over the charts, our current course, and help us plan for the future. When the number of positive cases spiked early in the semester at Madison, Eau Claire, and River Falls, our people took swift action to flatten the curve by quarantining hotspots and temporarily moving classes online. The strategy has worked, and the numbers at these universities is down, and they're now back to in-person classes. I really want to salute the tireless hard work of the operations team. The team that I put together and we meet every morning are the ones that put together the plan statewide, and it's been very successful. Their attention to detail and their dedication to making this fall's 2020 semester a success. I am very proud of what's been accomplished. I'm also encouraged by the numbers we're now posting. Over the past 6 weeks, here's today's, we broke today the first time over 2,000 tests. Actually, it was 2441 in our outstate campuses, regional campuses, and over 1,600 at Madison. And today's rate, we're down at 2%. It's actually lower than 2%, but we rounded it up so you individually know that. That is an amazing progress that all the campuses have been able to accomplish. The cornerstone of our overall strategy continues to be the antigen testing of asymptomatic individuals. This helps us to identify potential spread, allows us to take proactive steps when we find that spread to control it. If you follow the numbers that are posted on our system dashboard, you will see that our approach is working. After the early increase in positives when students first returned to campus, a surge that we expected, given the large increase in testing, our numbers now continue to mostly trend downward and hold stable. In fact, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is currently tracking our approach at UW-Oshkosh and how effectively the antigen testing program in monitoring the spread of COVID-19 is actually working among asymptomatic students. If the CDC, and I'm certain they will be able to, can validate the protocol being used at UW-Oshkosh and elsewhere around the UW system, we can serve as a model for surveilling students on other campuses around the country. At this time, most of our universities are at expected levels of testing, while several universities are continuing to increase their testing rates. I should also note that based on the current usage, our inventory of antigen tests appears to be more than adequate for the remainder of the fall semester. We also continue to monitor the use of isolation and quarantine space. We're also reviewing the processes for planning and taking care of students in these spaces. Dr. Ryan Westergaard, an infectious disease specialist at UW-Madison School of Medicine and Public Health, joined our COVID-19 Operations Center meeting last week. He reiterated the importance of taking the right steps to reduce transmission and spread of COVID-19 through isolation and quarantine, as well as changes in behavior. Since we're entering the flu season now, we're also taking heed of the Department of Health and Human Services recommendations related to symptomatic individuals in the use of the flu test. That is, if a symptomatic individual's antigen test returns negative, that individual should be given a flu test. This will help reduce the demand on severely stressed PCR testing labs. This is the labs that you have to send in the test and it comes back 24 to 48 hours later. It's also recommended that individuals with symptoms or other high-risk patients who test negative with a PCR test then be considered for a flu test or for some other respiratory viruses. Looking ahead, planning for spring 2021 is already underway. We're working very closely with chancellors and others at our universities to examine all of our options, including reviewing the staffing as well as the personal protective equipment utilization needs during the fall of 2020. Brent Tilton with UW System Procurement will be working with the procurement directors at each university to start forecasting ongoing personal protective equipment needs, including those related to testing, assisted health services, and academics. This process is being expedited to meet the November 1 procurement deadline. Meanwhile, the DOA administer higher educational institution financial assistance, or HIFA allocation of $19 million also needs to be fully committed by November 1. Vice President Sean Nelson is working with chief business officers at each of the campuses to ensure that we are planning accordingly. Finally, last week we shared with chancellors some guidelines for disciplining students for off-campus conduct that potentially threatens the campus community, the health and safety during this COVID-19 pandemic. The UW has the authority to discipline students for such non-academic conduct off campus under Wisconsin Administrative Code Chapter 17 provisions. Overall, we are encouraged by the culture of responsibility that most students seem to be embracing. And if you look out when you leave campus today, you will see students all over wearing their mask. It's really a positive thing to see. But it remains vital that everyone stays vigilant in the months ahead. I am very proud of our students for adapting to these challenging times. Next, I want to turn to some administrative reforms that I want the UW system to embark upon and move on as soon as possible. As you know, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. And I want to do everything I possibly can so the next president has a UW system that is stronger and even better prepared to succeed into the future. I like to get things done, and I have a long and successful track record of doing just that. I believe that's a big part of why you, the Regents, wanted me here. The University of Wisconsin is one of the country's great public university systems. You've heard me say that. But it can be better. And I'm going to do everything I can to make it the best that it possibly can be. I want to take action on 4 key fronts to improve our administrative efficiency. The Administration Transformation Program, or ATP, the Procure to Pay project for P2P, information technology as a service, and moving to a single payroll system for all employees. Our system is very obsolete, in need of updating. It's an old car trying to maneuver in a new technology world. These reforms will make us more efficient in terms of both time and money and going to help protect our information security. Let me address each of these 4 key areas very quickly. First, ATP. This is the big one. It's the Administrative Transformation Program. For those of you who were in the Business and Finance meeting this morning, you heard a comprehensive presentation on the need for ATP and a request for the support of this board. I'm going to add my voice to this chorus. We must do it. As I said earlier, the UW system is a premier public university system, but the background operations designed to support ours are very inefficient, outdated, and very costly. We also need to be able to clearly ascertain what our financial balances are at any one time. We cannot even tell at the end of a month, a quarter, what our financial balances are. That to me is not, speaks well for this particular great university. The current administrative support model has also introduced risk around information security, data availability, and financial controls. Something the latest LAB report was clear to point out. And I think the LAB report, even though it was very critical, gives us the impetus for moving forward. We can use the LAB report to say, we're going to fix all the things you've said. Granted, we've made mistakes, but now we're going to fix it, and we're going to fix it for the future. This situation is completely unacceptable and not befitting our position. We must change. I'm calling for a comprehensive transformation of UW's administrative policies, processes, and technology through changing the ATP. This is essential, I believe, to move the UW forward. ATP is a multi-year program that will work across the UW to correct the current complexity and build an administrative infrastructure for the future. This will be accomplished by streamlining policies, standardizing processes, organizing roles, and modernizing our technology with cloud-based enterprise resource planning software. UW system faces many challenges that are now compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic. But one thing is clear, now is the time to act. If we are to remain competitive and scale for the future, delaying this inevitable transformation will only increase complexity and costs when attempting a transformation in the future. Based on approval of a financing plan, the planning phase for ATP is going to begin in January. Second, I also want to transform our purchasing and payment processes. The current processes, ladies and gentlemen, used by all UW institutions to support our $1.5 billion in annual expenditures are outdated, customized by individual campuses, and inadequately resourced. UW-Madison alone, just think of this, UW-Madison alone has 39 customized ancillary systems to pay bills, which are difficult to use and maintain. The current state causes inefficiency, increased risk of fraud and non-compliant purchasing card use, and a reduced capacity to realize cost savings through strategic sourcing activities. This cannot continue. The procure-to-pay automation project, better known as P2P, is working to bring about real change. Led by purchasing and accounts payable experts from across the system, P2P will implement a cloud-based platform to replace and improve purchasing functionality in the shared financial system and various other third-party systems. It's more than a technology implementation. It's an improvement of the processes that drive the work of UW's purchasing and accounts payable staff. The estimated new costs, I want everybody to understand this, over a 5-year period include additional staffing are $11.3 million. A moderate case estimate, however, of the return on investment is a 66% net present value over 5 years. Savings generated through strategic sourcing initiatives will take the form of lower costs for products and services and will be realized by campus departments not captured for central reinvestment. A third area of reform I am putting forward is information technology as a service. While there are some key enterprise-wide IT services in the UW system, the vast majority of our IT resources are controlled by the local institution and are deployed in a non-standard manner across these institutions. This fragmented approach to IT decision-making has created duplication, non-standardization issues across the UW system, leading to higher costs that are unsustainable at present funding levels. Technology advancements over the past decade will allow us to commoditize these core IT services to achieve broader scale, lower costs, and increase quality. We will invest the resources and intentions required to fully rationalize these disparate environments into a harmonious and efficient solution. We call this initiative IT as a Service. It will serve as a critical foundation for improving our information security as well as facilitating ATP. We are appreciative that UW-Madison and UW-La Crosse are our initial partners, and we will be expanding to other institutions in a phased-in approach over the next several years. Finally, I have directed UW Shared Services to launch the Single Payroll Project, which is going to result in a one payroll cycle in which all employees are paid bi-weekly and benefit deductions are going to be split evenly between the bi-weekly paychecks, which will be help the lower paid employees in our system. UW currently has two pay cycles, monthly and bi-weekly. The Single Payroll Project will eliminate the monthly payroll cycle and move all employees to bi-weekly, thereby creating a number of operational efficiencies as well as elimination of several customizations in HRS. This standardization reduces the number of pay calendars by 60%, reduces pay groups by 83%, provides approximately 800 hours of efficiency to the payroll process, simplifies related businesses, processes, and budgeting, and better positions us towards a future conversion to the cloud via ATP. In addition, splitting benefit deductions evenly between the payrolls will ease the payment of premiums, as I've said, for employees. It's going to create a more uniform paycheck for employees, pay new employees quicker, reduce the number of paychecks issued, and allow for a full monthly benefit reconciliation. And making this switch is going to require both policy and operational priceless changes, HRS adjustments, and much change management. We recognize this as a large and very personal change for employees and how they manage their finances. Change management is key and needs to start very early on in this effort. In conclusion, I'm asking a lot in calling for these changes. I recognize that. But if we truly want to make the UW the best it can be, and I know this Board of Regents does, we must be bold and we must do what's necessary today. And I know some people are asking me why you want to do all of these things, because they're necessary and they all integrate together and they're all going to make this system so much better for the future. That's why I'm pushing very hard to have all of them done and completed as soon as possible. And that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, concludes my report. And thank you. I know it was long. I'm sorry, but it's very important. I appreciate your attention.
Thank you, President Thompson. At this time, let's move forward to our committee reports on actions taken this morning. This is item 7. I'll now call upon Regent Klein to report activities that have taken place in the Education Committee this morning. Regent Klein. Regent Klein, it shows that you're off mute. We're not picking up your audio. Why don't we do this, Regent Jones, if you're prepared, we'll go to the Capital Planning and Budget Committee. We'll hear your report from this morning, and then we'll pivot back to Regent Klein, who can get her audio in alignment.
Perfect. Thank you,
Regent
Regent
Jones.
President Peterson. The Capital Planning and Budget Committee met this morning and received an update on progress of the UW Systems 21-23 capital budget by Senior Associate Vice President Alex Rowe. She reported that the budget was sent to the DOA in mid-September and expects more in-depth conversations with the DOA will take place closer to the end of the calendar year. The committee also considered 7 resolutions. The first 4 resolutions are on behalf of UW-Madison through the UW Managed Program. The committee considered and approved Resolution D to complete the design and to construct the biochemistry cryo-electron microscopy renovation. The project supports a National Institute of Health grant awarded to Principal Investigator Elizabeth Wright and the UW-Madison Biochemistry Department. The project renovates space to create the Midwest Center for Cryo-Electron Tomography. Next, the committee reviewed and approved Resolution E to complete the design and to construct the Chamberlain Hall 6th-floor Weaver Instrumentation Lab renovation project. This project will renovate space to create an instrumentation laboratory for Dr. Susanna Woodicus Weaver, who is known for her research in the emerging field of prebiotic astrochemistry. The committee then considered and approved Resolution F to increase the scope and budget of the Weeks Hall 4th floor Dutton Laboratory renovation project. This project, originally approved as a 600 square feet remodel to create a geoscience laboratory for Professor Andrea Dutton, an isotope geochemist who specializes in U-series radiometric dating. The final UW managed project, Resolution G, was reviewed and approved by the committee to complete the design and to construct the Wisconsin Institute for Medical Research and NIH Lab Research Renovation Project. The project renovates space in the Wisconsin Institute for Medical Research Tower into a medical research vivarium lab for infectious disease research for the Wisconsin National Primate Research Center. The remaining 3 resolutions are on behalf of UW System for Department of Administration managed projects. The committee unanimously supported Resolution H to construct a 2019-21 classroom renovation instructional technology improvement program project at UW Green Bay. The Instructional Services Electrical Engineering Tech Lab renovation project will convert approximately 17,000 gross square feet as a permanent home for the Electrical Engineering and Technology program at UW Green Bay. Next, Resolution I was approved by the committee and allows the design and completion and construction of 4 all-agency maintenance and repair projects. 2 facility maintenance and repair projects are as follows. 1 at UW Stout to increase the budget to match recent bid results for the completion of the project scope of the Price Commons Kitchen Hood Replacement Project. The second for a system-wide project to provide and install new electronic meters throughout the multiple UW main campuses. And 2 utility repair and renovation projects. 1 at UW Eau Claire to demolish and reconstruct the parking lots for Hibbard Hall and Carlsgard Towers Hall, and the second at UW Stevens Point to replace 6 deteriorating steam pit structures across the campus. The last item considered and approved by the committee, Resolution J, permits construction of 2 minor facilities renewal projects. The first project makes repairs to the exterior envelopes of 6 UW Milwaukee facilities. Second project renovates the deteriorated HVAC system and the building's original skylights that have failed in the Carmen Library at UW Platteville. Regent President Peterson, I'd like to move resolutions D, E, F, G, H, I, and J.
Thank you, Chairman Jones. May I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Do we have any discussion for the Capital Planning and Budget Committee on these items? Seeing none in the room and none on the screen, I'll call the question. All those in favor of these items, vote by signifying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, what we're going to do is continue with committee reports, and we'll do Education Committee last. So I'm going to pivot to Regent Chris Peterson, who stepped in today to serve as chair of the Ready Committee. Regent Peterson, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Regent President Peterson, and good afternoon, everyone. The Ready Committee reviewed and approved the minutes of the August 20th, 2020 meeting, and committee members heard 3 presentations. First, we heard an update on research focused on water science from UW Green Bay. The world faces significant challenges regarding water quantity and quality that are expected to worsen during the 21st century. The global need for water science professionals able to solve critical water issues is accelerating and expected to continue. With the addition of its 3 new coastal campuses, the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay is expanding its academic, professional, and community connections to address these challenges. Dr. John Caters, Professor Kevin Furmanich, I know what it was, I just forgot, and Emily Tyner, UW Green Bay's newly appointed Director of Freshwater Strategy, provided an overview of current and planned programs as well as anticipated outcomes that will benefit the region and our state's economy going forward. Their work relates directly to one of President Thompson's key initiatives for moving the state's economy forward during the next biennium and beyond. Our next agenda item featured UW-Madison Chancellor Rebecca Blank and UW-Madison Professor John Eckert, who described a multi-year project under his direction highlighting research related to the impact of COVID-19 on student proclivity towards entrepreneurship and the potential impact on the Wisconsin economy. Importantly, Dr. Eckert's project relies on the collection and analysis of big data and incorporates recent findings regarding the impact of COVID-19 on the risk-taking propensities of entrepreneurs. Professor Eckert is one of the nation's leading subject matter experts in this field of study. Finally, we heard an informative update from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation with the progress report on the Governor's Blue Ribbon Commission on Rural Prosperity. The Blue Ribbon Commission was created by Governor Evers' Executive Order 65 to gather on-the-ground input from diverse stakeholders throughout the state whose lives and livelihoods are tied to the vitality of rural communities. As the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic have been realized, the Commission scheduled a series of virtual listening sessions through the summer and early fall to explore opportunities to build more resilient rural communities. The Blue Ribbon Commission has actively sought out local perspectives regarding economic challenges facing the communities, individuals, and businesses across the state in an effort to find solutions that can help make rural Wisconsin more prosperous for everyone. The goal is to turn ideas into action that can increase economic activity and improve the quality of life for future generations. We were pleased to hear today from Kellyanne Blazek, Director of the Office of Rural Prosperity at the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Kellyanne provided an overview of the new office along with the work of the Blue Ribbon Commission. I will also note that our own Regent Bob Atwell was appointed to Governor Evers as one of the Blue Ribbon Commissioners. Although Bob was unable to join us today, he has been working closely with Kellyanne and his fellow commissioners as they develop a series of recommendations designed to help advance Wisconsin's rural economy. In closing, I would like to thank President Thompson for supporting the UW System Regent Scholar Initiative. This past week, he announced the call for nominations from UW faculty for innovative research initiatives and business collaborations that will be honored early in 2021 as part of the Ready Committee's Regent Scholar Grant Program. Information about the Regent Scholar Program, which provides UW System's highest recognition for research, economic development, innovation, can be found online. Regent President Peterson, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Peterson. I get caught up in all of this. Any questions for Chris? Okay. Okay, hearing none, we're going to pivot to Regent Walsh, who will provide us an update of the Audit Committee and their work this morning. Regent
Thank you,
Walsh.
Regent President Peterson. Audit Committee did indeed meet this morning. Financial Audit Director from the Legislative Audit Bureau, Aaron Charlow, presented the beginning of their audit letter for the June 30, 2020 UW System Financial Statements Audit. She discussed the responsibilities of the auditors and management and the conduct of the audit. Ms. Charlow confirmed that if they were to detect material fraud, they would discuss the matter with management and the Audit Committee on a timely basis. Chief Audit Executive Lori Stortz reviewed the progress to date on the fiscal year 2021 audit plan. She confirmed that her office is making solid progress and expects to finish this year. She then provided a high-level summary of the results of audits recently issued by the Office of Internal Audit. This included the internal audit responses to independent validation, laboratory safety best practices report, laboratory safety executive summary, P-card continuous audit, and payroll continuous audit. Overall, she was comfortable with management's responses. Ms. Stortz will bring follow-up information regarding the final disbursement of the CARES Act student funds to the committee. She will also bring a summary of the P-card audit results from the inception of the audit until the present to the committee in December. Director of Compliance and Integrity, Katie Ignatowski, discussed the Office of Compliance and Integrity restructuring. She will now be reporting directly to President Thompson and is working on a proposal for dual reporting to the Audit Committee that she hopes to present by next spring. Ms. Ignatowski will provide follow-up information regarding civil rights investigations, timeliness, and communication protocols to the committee. Ms. Ignatowski and Pranitsia Clifton, Director of Youth Protection and Compliance, provided an update to the committee regarding the future of youth protection and compliance at the University of Wisconsin system. The committee is pleased that this work is underway and requested an update at the December meeting. That concludes my report, Regent President Peterson.
Thank you, Regent Walsh. Any questions for Regent Walsh this afternoon related to audit? Okay, seeing none, we'll pivot to business and finance. I'll turn it over to Regent Bechtel. I'll remind regents that you should expect Regents Jones and myself to recuse ourselves from item G. With that, Regent Bechtel.
Yeah, thank you, Regent President Peterson. Business and Finance Committee met earlier today. Bear with me, we've got several important reports, and then I'll be calling for approval. And thank you for noting the conflict of interest for Jones and Peterson. Item C, after we approved our August minutes, our committee approved the report on program revenue balances report. That was that pretty lengthy report in our packet. UW System Vice President for Finance, Sean Nelson, walked us through some of the key data points, and the committee asked some questions. Good report and good questioning from the committee. This includes unrestricted tuition balances have decreased by $17.7 million. That's a decrease of about 60% in tuition balances since FY13 when we really began measuring these things. This, of course, was a concern brought to us by the Wisconsin legislature, and the campuses obviously have been addressing this concern with a high degree of success. Auxiliary balances, those decreased by $42.6 million, or about 14% in FY20. However, it was noted that approximately 63% of the auxiliary unrestricted balances are for current or future capital commitments, including debt service, enumerated capital projects, and planned maintenance. So to say it another way, these auxiliary balances are largely accounted for by already specified future needs. Unrestricted balances also declined in both the general program operations and the federal indirect cost reimbursement. This was the first time it was noted that since the inception of the program, that all categories of unrestricted balances realized a decline from the previous year. Overall, total unrestricted balances declined by $93.4 million just in FY20. That's a reduction of $175 million, again, since FY13 when we began measuring this, or about 18.5%. Vice President Nelson also noted that the financial impact of the pandemic on unrestricted balances really won't be fully realized until we move into this next year, because only that last quarter was caught in the FY20 ending budget. So we will be keeping an eye on that and getting some reports as the year goes on to see how those fund balances are being affected by the pandemic and its overlying conditions. Item E, we approve the planning and implementation of the Administrative Transformation Project, ATP, this important initiative which President Thompson highlighted as one of his 4 priorities. This multi-year program will work across the UW system. It addresses current complexities in the administrative support model. The idea is to build a better future of administrative infrastructure, which entails streamlining policies, standardizing processes, organizing roles, modernizing technology, moving into a cloud-based resource planning software. This is a big ticket item. Total project projected cost is $212 million spread out over about a 4 or 5 year period. UW System Vice President for Administration, Rob Kramer, UW-Madison Vice Chancellor for Finance Administration, Laurent Heller, and Program Executive and Program Director for ATP, Steve Kish, and Nick Tincher, all provided an overview and answered questions, and there were numerous questions as our committee continues to deliver a good deal of oversight to this very important project. We realize this is a very significant outlay of cash, and our committee is very much committed to continue our vigilance on this very important initiative and to expedite and streamline this process. And I know we've all read the report, but the report that's in the packet I noted was refreshingly candid as a public document in terms of the need and urgency and the future efficiencies and improvements we can gain through ATP. Item F, UW-Madison Master Clinical Trial Research Agreement with Serview. That was tabled. We're going to take that up later, I suspect. Item G, the contract with Exact Sciences Corporation. The committee approved a master clinical trial agreement between UW-Madison and Exact Sciences. Vice Chancellor Heller introduced this contract for us. This is likely to exceed $1 million, under which the School of Medicine and Public Health and the Carbone Cancer Center at UW-Madison will be facilitating sample collection for various studies dealing with oncology diagnoses. These studies involve 1 or more blood draws. The samples will be processed and sent to Exact Sciences for analysis. This contract strengthens the partnership between UW-Madison and Exact Sciences, which, as we all know, is a very notable Wisconsin headquartered business, really at the forefront of the technology of their industry. So we couldn't be more pleased to just strengthen that partnership with Exact Sciences. Item H, the committee approved Regent Policy Document 2110. This regards the institutional relationships with associated affiliated organizations. The policy would require any university employee who serves on the board of directors of one of these associated affiliated organizations, that could be an alumni organization, athletic booster club, that person would be an ex officio non-voting member. A written agreement would be required should the associated affiliated organization receive administrative support from a UW system institution. And I think our report noted about 18 or so do. And address situations when the university employees may work for such affiliated organizations. Item I, this was approval of Regent Policy Document 2111, cost benefit reporting for foundations. The committee then approved this same policy document 2111. That policy requires annual cost benefit reports for every primary fundraising foundation, regardless of the value of administrative support they may receive, and cost benefit reports from associated affiliated organizations annually if the administrative support is valued at or above, I should say, $100,000. So we'll get those annual reports if they're getting that level of administrative receipts support. And every 5 years, we're going to get a report regardless of whatever administrative support they receive. Those annual summary of cost benefit reports will continue to be provided to us at the Board of Regents so that we can monitor and oversee these programs. I'm actually going to skip ahead to item L because it's related to affiliated organizations. We didn't need to take action on this, but it was a report. And again, it's in our packet. This shows us what's happening with these systems in FY20. Under the current policy, UW systems institutions must prepare an analysis for any such entity that receives more than $100,000 a year in administrative support. 82 foundations were identified in this report. So we've got 82 foundations supporting the educational mission of our campuses. And for FY18-19, so a bit dated, UW system institutions received $327.2 million from those primary fundraising foundations, yet we only had to provide $8.9 million in administrative support. So as Sean pointed out for us, an ROI of $1 for administrative support, $36 coming in terms of support for the universities and our missions. So good, strong ROI by those private institutions helping to support us. So again, these two policies related to reporting requirements provide an appropriate overview of foundations and affiliates connected with our campuses. But as importantly, we greatly appreciate the efforts and support of the UW system and our mission by these foundations. Again, in 1 year, they've raised and brought to the campuses over $325 million. And for that, I'm sure all of the regents express our support and appreciation. Item J and then K. So we're almost there. I told you it was a long one. UW System Executive Director for the Administrative Office of Trust Funds, Chuck Sanders, presented an overview of the Trust Funds Quarterly Investment Report. This ended in June of 2020. This included the UW System Trust Fund assets are now at $605.4 million, 462 some million in the long-term funds, 142 million and change in the income cash fund. Public equity investments have increased to 18.48%. Bond investments were returning 3.81%. Inflation-sensitive investments gained 5.26%, and private market portfolios returned 0.09%. For the quarter, the long-term fund increased in value over 10.36% before fees, while the UW Fund custom benchmark increased 10.22%. The income cash fund gained 0.07% for the period. So obviously the second quarter was a good quarter to be in the market, and our money managers did a nice job managing the funds for our future retirement needs. Lastly, Vice President Nelson continued on to the FY19 and 20 budget to actuals report. This indicates the year-end status of the UW system. So to President Thompson's point about the lag in our financial reporting, this is another example of it. We're now kind of seeing how the year ended. And we did pretty well. I'll make one comment in particular. The high-level summary detailed a small overall variance in revenue over expense. Through a few variances are notable. Some of the variances: a $143 million reduction in auxiliary revenue, largely due to pandemic and the departure of students from on-campus housing and dining back in March. So we lost some of those revenue dollars. UW institutions were able to offset much of those through both expense reductions and support through the federal CARES funding. Another variance, financial aid revenue, is actually up by approximately $51 million due to additional support, again from CARES funding, that was earmarked as direct aid to students. Overall, total variance of the $6.4 billion board-approved FY20 budget, these numbers are just staggering when you really start to think about them, over the year-end actuals was $27.5 million, or about 0.4%, 0.4%. So to be that accurate, to have such a slight variance of last year's budget to the actuals, that's really quite laudatory. And you add into that the unanticipated effects of the pandemic. So, kudos to Vice President Nelson and his staff and all the campuses. Really quite remarkable when you think about what we were able to budget and then go through that pandemic with those kinds of tight variances on their budget. So in conclusion, which is probably the best thing you've heard me say, on behalf of the Business and Finance Committee, I would now move for approval of agenda items C, D, E, G, H, and I.
All right, we have a motion on the table. Thank you, Regent Bechtel. May I have a second?
Second.
Second, Regent Jones. Any discussion? Regent Walsh.
Yes, Regent Bechtel, I had a question for you related to the ATP project. So number one, has the planning phase for this already begun? And how is that being funded? And how long do you anticipate the planning process for that will take?
Yeah, the plan, and I'll ask President Thompson to jump in if he likes, but the planning phase has been underway for several years. We are now going to move into the first phase of the project. And we noted in terms of a cash flow, I think we're going to spend maybe $4 million coming up in the next fiscal year. A lot of this spend will be coming down later on in the project as they really start to work with the consultants, buy the software. But the planning's been underway for several years.
Okay, so you're at the phase one, you called it?
Yeah.
And how, you said $4 million, where is that, what pot is that coming out of?
I believe it.
$4 million is coming from the Madison campus.
The Madison campus, reserves or tuition or?
I don't know where Becky's coming from, but
Okay.
this is a really a program as Chairman Bechtel has talked about. This has been worked on since 2017.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to really get kick-started in April of this past year. And then the cobalt came and it was postponed. And a lot of people think, you know, there's too much going on, but it is so badly needed, and Madison really wants this done. And so the 4 million will come, and we've already started planning. There'll be some more planning started on January of this coming year, and we're hoping for the first phase to be kicked in over probably in 2021.
Okay, so Madison is funding phase one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, which will redound to their benefit, and then those practices can then be implemented at UW and the other campuses, UW Milwaukee and other campuses. And for instance, Regent Walsh, at UW-Madison alone, in additional direct costs, we'll get to about a 10, maybe $20 million savings annually by just bringing in these efficiencies.
Right.
So $4 million to get those kinds of consistent types of savings is kind of the mindset.
Okay, when does the rest of the funding kick in then? So Madison's putting in this $4 million. You had a project cost of $212 million, am I correct?
Over 5 years.
Over 5 years.
Over 5 years.
So when does the next?
It'll probably be the second fiscal year, probably starting in July of 2021.
Okay.
I believe Vice President Kramer is on if we have financial questions. Rob, are you with us and able to hear us?
Yes, I am, Regent President Peterson.
Maybe just a quick comment on, maybe if I could just add a quick piece of emphasis. Back in April, as President Thompson discussed, we were on the pathway towards initiating phase one of ATP. And discussions were held about, given our COVID experiences, would this be the prudent time to do that? So we hit the pause button, I think very justifiably. And fortunately, because of the way that we've been able to re-enter this fall semester, and because we've been successful at bringing back students to campus, I think we've, as a leadership team at the system and with the campuses, have said, now's the time to execute on this and recognize that it is a multi-year program, but there's a tremendous amount of upside benefit in the out years, given the Byzantine and antiquated systems that we've got. So with that, I'll turn it over to Vice President Kramer just to make any.
One other thing, the subcontractors to our multiplicity of computers and so on and so forth are not going to be able to service. They're too obsolete in a few years. So it's going to come to a screeching halt probably by 2030. So it's just prudent to get started right now. We're going to do it in phases, so it will not break the bank in any 1 year, and we'll have time. And it really inures, a biggest chunk of this is going to really benefit the Madison campus the most. There's something like 33 different shadow computer systems going on in the Madison campus, and it's just obsolete, archaic, costly, and this is going to fix that thing and put it all in the cloud. So it's really badly needed. It'll make the University of Wisconsin so much better.
Vice President Kramer, anything to add?
The only thing I'd add is a clarification. We've been engaged in pre-planning since February of 2019. We brought that to the board then. With the approval today, we will be ending the pre-planning work between now and early spring, and then move to the planning and implementation phase. Schedules for Madison and system to go live in July of 2023, and then the other institutions in 2025. So just a clarification on that.
So Rob, if I could ask, at what point will the next infusion of money be required for this project?
So as was noted, UW-Madison has been funding the pre-planning. They have set aside funds in their PR balances to help going forward into the next fiscal year. UW System Vice President Nelson has also identified PR balances from UW System for the next 2 fiscal years. We are also continuing to work with the Department of Administration on the appropriate use of the master lease program to help finance a portion of it to spread the monies out. Fiscal year 22 is where the more significant spending starts, and that would be a mix of the master lease funding and primarily UW-Madison funding that they have set aside out of their operations.
It sounds like Chancellor Blank has been very generous. Appreciate that, Chancellor Blank.
That's a very accurate statement. Any other questions related to ATP? One comment I'd like to make related back to program reserve balances is there's been a number of news stories and focuses on our utilization of program revenue balances. And as Chairman Bechtel highlighted, 85% are allocated for things just like ATP. And that's been a very significant fiscal focus of ours since 2013 till today. And I think significant progress has been made. Same goes for tuition balances. Those are to be utilized last, but they are being utilized at some of our campuses by necessity. They are a snapshot in time. They both infill and then distribute as time goes by. And there are unique things. We've had a number of campuses that have had increased enrollment this year. That helps us. And that's why these program revenue and tuition balances are so sort of unique. But on balance, I'm incredibly pleased with the work of the system and the campuses to be financially accountable and disciplined about the utilization of these reserves. And with that, I will now call the question. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Same sign. And now we will pivot back to the Education Committee and Regent Klein.
Thank you, Regent President Peterson. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. My report today will begin by highlighting the presentations organized by Vice President Maribel Sosa to the Education Committee. These present how our campuses are striving to fulfill the mission of the University of Wisconsin system while at once addressing complex challenges related to COVID-19 during what is surely a remarkable moment in our history. The Vice President first invited Dr. Laura Dunkett to provide an update on the UW System online learning initiative, which generously has been funded by an anonymous donor. The purpose of the initiative is to confront one of the most critical challenges facing the UW system during the time of COVID-19, providing high-quality online learning at scale and across the UW system, while ensuring access and equity for all students. This presentation also helped us understand what the future of online learning may become after COVID-19 pandemic is over. The Vice President then invited 3 senior student affairs officers, 3 provosts, to help us understand how our University of Wisconsin system universities are planning for this fall semester. They also helped us to understand how our campuses are planning for the spring semester based on lessons they are learning now and that they have learned in the fall semester. We on the Education Committee will continue to provide oversight of this critical pivot that the University of Wisconsin system is making towards online learning and hybrid learning. Finally, the business of the committee included approval of the minutes from our August 20th meeting. We also approved 5 resolutions relating to updating Regent policy documents. So I'll move the resolutions en masse for approval of Resolution D. I'll list them and then move them forward. Resolution D, approval of changes to Regent policy document 4-18, making textbooks affordable. Resolution E, approval of changes to Regent policy document 9-1, principles for developing alcohol policies. Resolution F, approval of the rescission of Regent policy document related to distance education and the recreation of a new policy on distance education. Resolution G, approval of changes to Regent policy document 23-1, basic health module. And Resolution H, approval of changes to Regent policy document 30-6, policy on recognition of student organizations. So I would move the approval of those revisions.
Thank you, Regent Klein. We've got resolutions A through H. May I have a second? Second, Regent Walsh. Discussion on education committee items. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Regent Klein. Now we'll move to item number 12. This afternoon, we're going to get an update on the Student Behavioral Health Initiative. This board has heard several very compelling presentations over the past year and a half about the scope and magnitude of the problem, and we are increasingly aware of how these issues and concerns affect learning in the classroom and overall student success. I would continue to pay attention to these matters. Behavioral health is an issue that many experts have called a growing health crisis on our nation's campuses. The COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated the seriousness of the situation and the impact on students, faculty, and staff. These challenges are hardly unique to Wisconsin, and we join institutions across the country in trying to find viable solutions. Today, we will hear about how counseling centers in the UW system are addressing the situation, as well as more about the findings of the recent Counseling Impact Assessment Project. I want to commend the critical work being done on our campuses by so many people: the counseling centers, student health centers, disability services, senior student affairs officers, the dean of students offices, and all the others who play support success on our campuses. It takes everyone to make this work successfully. Before we get started, however, President Thompson would like to say a few words.
Thank you very much, President Peterson. And first, I just would like to thank the Board of Regents, because the leadership on this important issue is so important. When I was Secretary of Health and Human Services, we passed the health parity bill, making mental health and physical health one and the same and being treated equally. And it still hasn't been fully implemented. There still is always a disparity on mental health. It's on our campuses, it's in our communities, it's all over. And so this board, by taking this issue on, is so important. And as you all know, we put an initiative in the budget for the Board of Regents and for central administration to complement this particular item and to put some more money into it to increase the opportunities for students to get the necessary counsel that they need and deserve. Times are changing, and there's a lot more that needs to be done, but at least it's being recognized now as an item that has to be confronted. And this board is taking such a leadership role in it. I compliment you and commend you for doing that. It makes a difference, not just for the University of Wisconsin, but it also shows what this college, this system is doing nationally. And other campuses, I'm sure, will take notice of it. I understand that we're going to be hearing from 2 students today. We're going to provide their firsthand accounts of how critically important it is that we do everything we can to support the all-around health of all of our students. And health means physical as well as mental. Listen closely. Their stories are their own, but they represent so many others. And that is why it is so important for this Board of Regents and administration to take knowledge of this thing and do what we can together to improve it. So with that, President Peterson, thank you for giving me an opportunity to to thank you, but also to extol the need for this particular item.
Thank you, President Thompson. To get us started, please join me in welcoming Dr. Tanya Wesley, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at UW-Whitewater, who will administer our panel discussion. Dr. Wesley, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you for that introduction. And thank you to all the Regents for having us this afternoon. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Dr. John Apter, the newly hired Behavioral Health Coordinator at UW System, and Sandra Cox, Director of Counseling Center at UW-Oshkosh. I will be providing a brief intro and update, and then turn the presentation over to my colleagues. We would like to thank the board for your continued interest and generous allowance of time to discuss the important topic of behavioral health. As we have all seen, this topic continues to make headlines and take on a new meaning in the light of the pandemic and social unrest in recent months. Today, I will briefly review progress of the Student Behavioral Health Initiative before turning it over to my colleagues, who will take a deeper dive into the work of our counseling centers across the system. Their presentation will specifically focus on results of an ongoing counseling impact assessment project, the impact of COVID-19 and other events on student well-being, as well as the behavioral health service delivery. We will close with a discussion of priorities for 2021 and beyond. Next slide, please. With your support, we have been busy over the past year. Senior Student Affairs officers co-chaired 3 work groups composed of faculty members and practitioners from campus health and counseling centers, accessibility services, recreation, and campus police. These groups were formulated around 3 tiers that constitute a comprehensive approach to behavioral health. Tier 1 focused on critical behavioral health and crisis intervention services, such as counseling, health, disability, police, dean of students, and housing, all those who respond directly to crisis on our campuses. Tier 2 focused on outreach to and screening out targeted populations. This group concentrated on identifying problems early and making referrals, developing training for faculty and staff as gatekeepers, as well as developing mental health screenings for athletes, students of color, LGBTQ, and other represented groups. Tier 3 focused on student well-being initiatives, such as practices that help all students cope better with stress and become more resilient, which we focus, persistence, and retention, and can prevent mild concerns from becoming more serious. Our work groups submitted recommendations to President Cross earlier this year for review and approval. For the purposes of this presentation, the initiatives are presented in 3 categories on the screen before you. Initiatives that have been implemented and funded, initiatives in process, and those still pending. Category 1 highlights the 5 implemented and funded initiatives. The first initiative is the UW System Behavioral Health website, which summarizes UW System initiatives and connects visitors to campus resources. The second initiative, we have successfully recruited and hired our first Student Behavioral Health Coordinator, which you will hear from very shortly, to work with campus behavioral health professionals on implementing current recommendations, as well as developing future priorities. The third initiative, we have implemented an online tool accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to all students, faculty, and staff across the system to help with our most common presenting concerns, such as depression, anxiety, stress, and sleep. The fourth initiative, All campuses now include suicide crisis hotline information on the back of student ID cards. The fifth and final in this category, we have funded the UW Counseling Impact Assessment Project that you will hear more about today. A big thank you goes to the campus practitioners who served on these work groups and also the unwavering support we received from UW System's Office of Student Success for these accomplishments. The second category highlights the 2 in-progress initiatives. Work has begun on UW System medical withdrawal policy. The policy is aimed at achieving more consistency across all institutions and how we handle students who unexpectedly need to withdraw because of serious medical or behavioral health issues. In addition, funding has been approved to support annual cultural competency training so that our professional staff can continue to improve their understanding of and ability to meet the unique needs of all students. Finally, Category 3 highlights the 3 pending initiatives. These initiatives have been identified as important next steps, some of which you will be hearing about today in this presentation. The heaviest lift in terms of budget implications is staffing, which is critical to help our campuses adequately serve the rising number of students seeking behavioral health services. I would like to now introduce Dr. John Actor, the Student Behavioral Health Coordinator at UW System, who will present information learned from the Counseling Impact Assessment Project. John?
Thanks to President Peterson and the rest of the board for your part in supporting the Behavioral Health Initiative, including this new position that I have the privilege to occupy. Before I launch into the summary of the report that you see on the screen, I'd like to remind you of a question that was asked when the Senior Student Affairs Officers first came before the board in April of 2019. Sandy Scott asked for a show of hands for how many in the room had been impacted themselves or were aware of coworkers, close family members, or friends who had been impacted by mental or behavioral health issues. You might recall that many, if not most in the room, raised their hands. I have a different question today, and I can see some of you on the screen, so if you're willing to bear with me here for a second. By show of hands, how many of you have become more aware of the mental health of yourselves or others during the past several months of the pandemic? I'm seeing some head nods and some show of hands. I think we could all agree that this validates that what was already a growing concern in society and on our campuses has only become more so in the past several months. What I'm pleased to share with you today is a brief overview of the Counseling Impact Assessment Project, which will give you a snapshot of the over 14,000 students who sought help for behavioral health needs on our campus counseling centers in the past year. We'll also talk about the impact these services have had on their well-being and their success as students. This project got off the ground in 2010 as one of several recommendations of President Riley's Committee on Health, Safety, and Security following Virginia Tech and Northern Illinois campus shootings. The first recommendation was to assess mental health needs across the UW system student population. Those of you present in April of 2019 heard the results from the National College Health Assessment, which helps us to fulfill this recommendation to assess the mental health needs of the broad student population. The second recommendation of this committee was to assess the impact of mental health services provided on our campuses in an ongoing manner. This is the recommendation you will hear more about today, the experience and impact for students who seek help for their concerns on campus. The project set out to track a core set of common data elements across all UW system counseling centers for the purposes of providing common benchmarking data for each campus and to allow for system-level analyses of counseling utilization and impact. As you will see, the project consists of 2 primary components: a client information form completed by all students before they initiate counseling, and a learning outcome and satisfaction survey administered at the end of each semester to assess change after counseling and satisfaction with services. What you see on the screen is what this project accomplishes for us. In broad terms, it helps keep counselors and centers up to date on what is going on with students, helps them prioritize outreach and prevention efforts, and makes them more responsive and accountable to the students they serve. One of the key components of the Impact Project is a core set of questions asked when students first seek out services. We modeled these questions after a data set established by the Center for Collegiate Mental Health at Penn State University so that we could compare ourselves to counseling centers around the country. Before their first meeting, student clients fill out a standardized intake form that asks about their current concerns, as well as personal and mental health history items to provide a more complete picture of their situation. One section is a simple checklist of concerns that might have prompted students to seek help. This is what you're looking at on the screen. Similar to the National Public Health Assessment survey results, you see that anxiety, depression, and general stress dominate concerns students bring to counseling. I want to emphasize for this and all other slides, what you're looking at is percentages among the students who sought counseling. These are not percentages among the whole student population. So if you think they're quite high, that's why. You might remember that between 40 and 50% of the general student population report strong feelings of depression or anxiety at times, and about a quarter to a third have received a diagnosis of depression or anxiety. What this slide suggests is that, fortunately, many of these students find their way to our counseling centers, where they get professional service from licensed psychologists, counselors, social workers, and marriage and family therapists, in addition to a range of counselors in training. The concerns on the screen represent the top 10 self-reported concerns students bring to counseling. The actual list is about 3 times as large and covers a wide gamut of issues that are present in any outpatient mental health setting, with certain categories endorsed with greater frequency among young adults. Next slide, please. Knowing the prior treatment history of students helps providers coordinate care and build on past efforts from students' previous experiences with seeking help. Note here that our system counseling centers are pretty similar to national averages in terms of those who've been hospitalized or taken medication for mental health concerns. But we exceed national averages for students with prior counseling experiences. This corroborates our counseling utilization increase, where we also exceed national averages. For comparison, just a decade ago, the percentage of students who reported attending counseling in the past was consistently under 50%, and you can now see it's at 67%. This increase over time supports the notion that stigma has declined and people are getting help earlier in their lives than they were previously. Next slide. Like all of us, the concerns that overwhelm us at times don't exist in isolation and often are caused by, or at least influenced by, past experiences. We can also choose coping mechanisms at times that become problems in themselves. So we ask about many other things other than presenting concerns. Here you see some of the more frequent antecedents or co-occurring experiences that influence a student's presenting concerns. I'd like to draw your particular attention to the fact that roughly 40% of students attending counseling have experienced some form of trauma in their lives. Trauma is defined in this intake questionnaire as an event that caused a person to feel intense fear, helplessness, or horror. This is very similar to language as one of the diagnostic criteria for PTSD. As a field and as a society, we are becoming more and more aware of the impact that trauma has on both mental and physical health outcomes, and are making strides toward becoming trauma-informed in our practices. This is one of the many important considerations in working with our student population today. Next slide. It is standard practice for behavioral health professionals to screen for self-harm, suicide, and violence risk, as these are often critical factors in determining the urgency and type of care that a student might need. We refer to the items on the screen as critical items because they identify those most at risk from a safety perspective. Note that we exceed national averages for students reporting history of self-harm and suicide-related items, but not for considering harm to others. And I guess we should be thankful for that. These are lifetime prevalence rates, and when any of these issues become more acute, they often involve a response not only from our counseling staff, but also university police, housing staff, dean of students' offices, and others. Our behavior intervention or care teams play a big role in managing those most at risk, with goals of rapid intervention to address any crisis and follow-up care to reduce the probability of recurrence and to help students continue their educational journey. Next slide. The second component of the Counseling Impact Project is the Learning Outcome and Satisfaction Survey distributed at the end of each semester. This goes to all students who attended at least one counseling session that term. It asks students to share both personal and academic outcomes that resulted from counseling, as well as satisfaction with services. This slide is a snapshot of the personal outcomes that students reported last year. Note that nearly 80% of students say they made improvements on their presenting concerns and overall well-being. Both controlled studies and general surveys of adults who attend counseling indicate that between 2/3 and 80% of people who seek help experience significant improvement. Ours is a general survey and is right in line with other outcome research in behavioral health settings. The other items on this slide reflect the fact that counseling can do more than just help with immediate concerns. In fact, an additional goal and benefit of most forms of counseling is also to build on clients' capacity to manage future problems with greater resilience. The feedback our centers receive from their clients tell us we are doing a pretty good job in this realm as well. Next slide. Students who attend counseling on campus overwhelmingly report that they appreciate having these services accessible on campus and report high levels of satisfaction with both their counselors and their counseling experience. With the important focus on cultural competency, it is good to know that clients perceive their counselors as accepting of and sensitive to their individual identities. However, we know that some students also want to see more diverse staff members who share their lived experiences, as this can lead to improved help seeking and better outcomes for underrepresented students. This is a goal we will talk about a little bit later in the presentation. Perhaps most importantly, central to the mission of all counseling centers and student services offices in general is to help students overcome barriers to academic success so that they can remain in school and graduate. We are doing well in this area too. For those students who indicate that they were struggling with academics or even thinking of leaving school, the majority indicate that counseling helped them focus better and persevere with their education. To put the retention statistic into real numbers, on average, approximately 25% of student clients say that they were thinking of leaving school before counseling. The 72% who said counseling helped them stay in school accounts for over 2,500 students across the system. If we add to that students who did not self-identify as retention risks before counseling, the number rises to nearly 6,000 students who said counseling helped them stay in school. That's just in one academic year. If we use an average annual tuition amount across the system of $9,000, this amounts to over $50 million in tuition dollars to our institutions. Next slide. Some of you will recall from previous presentations that our centers experienced a large percentage increase in counseling utilization in recent years, despite flat enrollment trends. This slide shows that the trend continues, documenting a 15% increase over the past 5 years, even when accounting for a slight dip in spring of 20 as campuses sent students home and adjusted to serving them remotely due to COVID-19. For more context, this 15% increase follows a 41% increase over the previous 6 years. This has created a true staffing crisis and impacted the way in which our centers provide services. We have no reason to believe this trend will subside given the factors previously discussed, like stigma reduction and new stressors related to our current times. Next slide. On the whole, centers have indeed improved their staffing levels, but not at a rate that keeps pace with accelerating demand. A standard we've communicated in previous presentations recommends at least one counselor for every 1,500 or 1,000 students. It's important to note that this standard was first established more than 3 decades ago when counseling utilization was much lower than it is today on most college campuses. Because the standard is outdated and currently being revised, our behavioral health work group proposed adopting the higher standard of one counselor for every 1,000 students as the aspirational goal across the system. Currently, only 2 campuses meet this standard, and just 9 of 13 currently meet the 1 to 1,500 standard. This is simply inadequate to meet demand and results in decreased access, waiting lists, and a lower standard of care provided to our students. When we talk to counseling center directors about their priorities, if they achieve better staffing, 3 things are routinely highlighted. First, they need more diverse staff to better serve underrepresented populations who tend to have higher rates of mental health need. Second, they'd like to staff more case managers to work with those who have the most complex needs, to help them navigate systems of care that often include both on-campus and off-campus resources. And third, they'd like staff who can focus on well-being and prevention initiatives to enhance the mental health and well-being of all and balance out the number of students who truly need more time-intensive clinical services. So with that, we're at a transition point. I could stop for questions if folks have them. Otherwise, I will next introduce my colleague, Sandy Cox.
Questions for Dr. Acker? I've got a quick one. This is completely administrative, but back to the outcomes that we received from the surveys. Do you get strong participation from our clients, so to speak, our students that visit counselors?
That's a great question. It varies campus to campus. Some of our campuses deliver these or administer these surveys in their centers. So when students come in for an appointment, they tend to get a higher rate, but they're only getting those students who come in who are still seeking counseling at the time of the survey. Others will email these out to all clients, and those rates are a little bit lower. I think I don't have it right in front of me, but I think the average is about a quarter of clients complete the survey at the end of each semester across the system.
25% response rate is pretty strong given the emotional components of all of this. Other questions for Dr. Acker before he moves on? Regent Walsh.
Thank you, Doctor, for that presentation. I'm not sure if you're the person that can answer this question, but at university police departments on campus, are they getting mental health training and how to handle those things that might come up? I mean, we're reading a lot of that happening nationally. Do you happen to know the training status around the system?
To some extent, there was the chief at Madison was actually on our Tier 1 work group, and knowing the officers, the campus I came from was UW Stout. They increasingly get good training on handling mental health crises because in the state of Wisconsin, police are the ones who are called upon for welfare checks and have the ability to institute a Chapter 51, which is the involuntary commitment. They do that with the assistance of a mental health professional, and that's by state statute. But ultimately, it is their call. So they've increasingly gotten very good training. I can just speak from personal experience. The UW Stout police are very well trained and do a very nice job when called upon.
Thank you.
This is Regent Hall. Question, in terms of some of the situations that students are reporting, do you find a lot of anxiety among students regarding the racial unrest that are going on? The challenges sometimes between even police officers and students on our campuses?
The answer is yes, and I think I'm going to just have you pause that question because Sandy's going to address that a little bit in the next section.
Any other questions before we pivot, move forward?
All right, we'll have more time for questions later. I'd like to introduce next my colleague Sandy Cox, who is the Director of Counseling at UW Oshkosh. She's going to share reflections from herself and colleagues about how COVID-19 has impacted our students and the delivery of services on our campuses. So Sandy, take it away.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be part of this conversation. I hope that my participation today could give you a deeper understanding of what the impact has been on students, and also just to understand how counseling centers have been impacting student wellness and student retention. It's been a challenging time for all of us, hasn't it? It's really been hard to have all this uncertain times, unknowns, stress, distress. All these changes are going on, and our students are experiencing the same. You know, mental health is being described as an epidemic of the pandemic, which I really believe to be true. You know, we all are paying attention a little bit more to our mental health right now, and there's some challenges for all of us, and there's some challenges for students as well too. So in the next slide, we're going to really talk about what some of those challenges are. So we talked a little bit about, I think John had shared in some of that data about anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression has long-standing been the reasons why students come in, the top reasons why students come into the counseling center. Depression used to be leading the way, now anxiety kind of leads the way, but it's no different right now. And in fact, it increased significantly. The students who had anxiety and depression before are just having more of it. And it's easy to understand when we talk about all the challenges we have going on. But now we also have students who've never experienced any level of mental health before, some having some anxious feelings coming in, some depression from all the isolation and loneliness coming in. And then we have to remember that life is still happening for students. They still are having traumas, they're still having loss, they're still having normal developmental things like breakups and things of that sort. But in this situation, it's very complicated and becomes a lot more challenging for them. And then we have the health and financial insecurities. You know, a lot of students aren't really thinking about their physical well-being until now. Now they're worried about it. Now they're worried about, am I going to catch this? Am I going to catch this and give this to somebody that I love? That's a big one that we're hearing from students. They're really concerned about their loved ones' well-beings. And we've had students who have had loss due to the virus. And that's important to remember that too. And grief is especially complicated right now with all the challenges we have with isolation and things. We've had financial changes. Several of us have had financial status changes where people have lost jobs, have had impacts of lower paychecks. Students having that impact of, being a little more worried about how they're going to pay their bills, maybe never having have worried about that before or worried about what's going on in their family. And we know that those kind of worries do impact students' ability to really focus in and be successful and well. And then we know in difficult times, we all have choices to make with the way in which we cope. We can cope negatively, we can cope positively, and students are the same. And we know that the more negatively we cope, the more negative mental health is going to be. And so we really want to encourage students to cope positively, but we do know that some negative coping has been going on. And some of that negative coping is some increase in substance use. You can imagine, some substances often can numb things, can numb the things that you're going through. And there's going through a lot of social isolation and just so much challenges. Then we also have interpersonal violence. You may have all read quite a bit of articles out there these days on the increase of domestic violence in the home or the increase of dating violence. And college students are experiencing that too. Then there's personal violence. So personal violence, that's one that I really want to talk about too. So personal violence means, thoughts of harm to self or engaging in harm towards self. And I have to tell you, I've been at the University Counseling Center for 25 years now. I started when I was 6, just kidding. And in those 25 years, this is the worst it's ever been as far as the amount of students coming in. The amount of students coming in with suicidal ideation. I can tell you on our campus at Oshkosh, it is the majority of our students coming in right now are endorsing that they have experienced suicidal ideation in the past week. That's a lot. That's a lot of really high distress. And so I impress upon that to mean that we don't have any more distressed students than anyone else. As a matter of fact, all of our national surveys of college campuses are saying that is what's happening across the nation. It's just telling you how deeply students are being impacted right now. We have strained relationships as well. We all are at some level of stress or distress. And, if you're living within a small group now, you going to tend to get on each other's nerves, or then you might be isolated as well too. There's a lot of, going back to that idea of loneliness. There's a lot of loneliness. There's been talk about calling loneliness the next epidemic, and I could see that being the case as well too. It's, no matter what we're trying to do on campus, we still have such strong guidelines that we need to have to keep everybody well, that it's very hard for students not to have some lack of disconnection or loneliness. And if there's one thing we know, and all the research shows, is that connection is the number one reason and number one indicator for personal happiness. So the more we feel connected, the happier we are. And so right now, students are feeling a lot less connected. And so we're going to naturally feel a lot less happy. And then I do want to talk about the social justice concerns that have been going on in our nation. We need to realize that that has also had a very big impact on our students. We have students who are feeling a great deal more fear or anxiety, trauma, grief, anger, lots of range of emotions from all students, whether it be students who identify with the concerns that are going on, allies of our marginalized students. Everyone is feeling some type of impact when it comes to the social justice things going on in our nation. And I think as we're also knowing that we're in this current situation, it makes it especially more challenging for people. So in our next slide, we're going to talk about, so what are we doing about it? So we have all these challenges and more. And so what we had to do is we had to pivot very quickly to virtual services. And the reason we needed to do that is we knew that students were going to be struggling. Like their life just got turned upside down in March, just like all of ours. But they needed our support. So we needed to find a way that we could suddenly just do services virtually. And just like everybody else, we had to do a lot of logistic things. What does it mean working from home? What does it mean, all those things? But I think we had some unique things from the standpoint that we also have a lot of laws that really guide us through telehealth and just counseling in general. So we had to make sure that we were in line with all the laws that were going within our state, within our border states. We had to make sure that we were changing our policies and procedures so that they supported us. Some of us are accredited, like my campus. We had to make sure we were following the accreditation standards within these guidelines. We had to look at technology, and a lot of us had some challenges with technology as far as especially portable technology. We needed to look at making sure we were doing best practices. Like we wanted to make sure that we weren't just going virtually, but we were doing quality work virtually, because it was so important that we really walked with students through this journey of how challenging this has been. So we did all of that. And I have to say that we've, the campuses at Wisconsin, the counseling centers there, they're all amazing. I've never worked with better colleagues in my life than the ones I work with now. And I can tell you, we all pivoted fast and we all supported through each other through this, and we all relied on each other to say, okay, you're doing this, you're doing this. We really worked together to really provide very quality services to our students in a very fast way, in a very new way. And then there's outreach and training. So outreach and training is super important because we want to reach students more than just the ones who are coming into our counseling centers. We want to support the wellness and retention of students across campus. So the best way we can do that is through our outreach and training. So we also had to pivot that and go virtual with that as well. And so for those of us who are counselors, I'll speak for myself only. I am not technological savvy whatsoever. But that meant I had to figure it out. So because you have to rework your web page to make sure it's very supportive with resources, and get involved with social media and podcasts and YouTube channels and all these things I never thought I would ever be able to do that I do now, and other campuses as well too. And then we wanted to just make sure that we're going to look towards the future and say that outreach and training is really going to be the way in which we're going in the future, because we really want to impact campus wellness as a whole. And there's really no one better to do that than a counseling center, because there's no one better on your campus who understands student wellness than your counseling center. Then we also had to do training. So, everybody was worried about how are we going to support students in this virtual format? What's going on with them? We do our training for suicide prevention. Now, how do you find that? How do you catch that in a student when you're talking to them in a computer? These were all really important things. So the counseling centers had to figure out a way to do that as well, too. And they did. And I think we also did a lot of assistance with faculty as well, figuring out how to support the student virtually. What is the impact of the student going to look like in this capacity, and to be able to support them through that. And so that's been really important for us as well, too. And then the last thing I really want to mention with the modified service delivery is staff well-being and retention. We're not working any harder than anybody else. Everybody, every department, every person I talk to are just working so much right now. There's so many committed people out there. And we're not probably not any more stressed than anyone else. I think what the uniqueness to University Counseling Center staff are that we have a different level of responsibility than anyone else. Every day we are seeing students who are either talking about dying by suicide or have engaged in behaviors about dying by suicide. And that is a really heavy burden. That is a big load to carry. And as that's increased, it's really been difficult. It's been very difficult on staff. And so for us to stay well is so important because, a counselor can't really have a bad day, because if you have a bad day, you have the potential to really impact a student in a negative way. Just a mere yawn in a session can make a student feel like they're boring you or what they're saying is not important. So imagine how important it is for us to maintain our own well-being while this is also happening to us as well. So then moving to the next slide, let me talk a little bit about what the impact has really been. So going back to the data that John shared. So what it's telling us, as you can see, there's students are saying, yep, we're really having a hard time with this virus thing. This pandemic is really tough. But they're also saying, and if you look at that top one, which I think is so important, 91% said that telecounseling positively impacted their well-being. 91%, that's amazing. You really can't get too many people at 91% to say much of anything to agree upon, but that's great. And the other one that I want to really point out too is that 83% of saying that they feel resilient, because resiliency is such a wonderful thing. It's that ability to bounce back in challenging times, that if you get knocked down during a difficult time, you get back up and keep going with some strength. And 83% of our students are feeling that way. And I think that's really a great thing. So then the last thing I want to talk to you a little bit about is the silver linings. So people who know me know that I tend to really focus on silver linings. So if we move to the next slide, we can see that. There we go. And so I look for the good in everything. And I think that that's part of what led me to be a counselor, is helping people to find the good even out of the bad. And there's been a whole lot of bad. We all know that. But there's been a lot of good. And so to share with you a little bit about the silver linings that we've had, this is the first time, at least in my experience of life, where we have had a whole world have a collective suffering. Everyone is suffering through this in some way. There's nobody who's not impacted in some way. And through that collective suffering, we've had an increase in compassion towards others. I don't know if you've noticed it or not. I notice. I know my neighbors more now than what I ever knew them before, because everybody's saying hello more. Everybody's checking in on each other, just seeing how they're doing. And I think that compassion towards others is going to really continue on and have an impact in this world that we haven't seen before. And then there's more and more time for self-reflection. Sometimes too much time for self-reflection. Sometimes we get a little sick of ourselves, I do anyway. And students are feeling the same. They're having some more time to really reflect on what's meaningful to them, what really means something to them, and focusing on that, what brings them joy. We talk a lot about that in Counseling Center, like, okay, there's some hard stuff here, so you balance it out by joy. Now's the time to figure out what brings you joy. And that is so important to figure out, especially at that age, how well it's going to carry them through. And again, going back to the fact that this might be the first time people are just paying attention to their mental health. People can go through their entire life and not pay attention to their mental health and not realize the impact that does play out in your life. But everybody in some way is paying attention to it. So imagine how much better that maybe our future might be, because we are doing a little bit more to take care of our mental health. And then it goes back to that resilience that I just was talking about. There's the students are developing skills and strengths in ways that we've never had to see them happen before. I remember when I was a freshman in college, the Challenger exploded. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. Like, I can remember everything about it. And there was some part of the trauma that really made me understand that things were different. And it really had an impact on me. And then I was working at a University Counseling Center when 9/11 happened. And I remember thinking about, so how is this going to impact students? And what I saw then was this increase in resiliency. So I really believe now that there is going to be an increase in resiliency, and that's going to really bode well for our students. We also are seeing that counseling centers really are an important part of student retention. Mental health plays a big role in whether or not students continue on in college. And we know that when they seek our resources, they tend to stay in college more. And so during this pandemic, it's been even more evident of how important that we are in helping students to make their way through. And another thing is that increase in face-to-face connection. You know, students are wanting to put down these screens and put down their phones, and they want to connect with each other again. They want to see people in person. And that's something that we've always wanted. We've wanted students to want to connect more in a real way rather than a virtual way. So I think towards our future, that's going to be a great thing to see students really wanting to put down the virtual and really get more connected in real time. And then the thing I think is even most important is the collective hope. That our students are saying that they're very hopeful about a future. They know that it's going to get better. They know that things are going to be better, and things might even be better than what they were before this all happened. And hope is the greatest foundation for our well-being in life. So I'm really hopeful as well. So that's the end of my part of the presentation, or my conversation, actually. And so I have the honor of being able to introduce the most important part of our conversation today, that, from my opinion, is our student participation. So our students who we are having joining us are Tasia Champion, who comes from UW Oshkosh, and we have Danny Madonia, from UW La Crosse, who are going to be joining us. So I believe Tasia is going to be the first person who is supposed to go. Is that correct, or am I being told maybe not? I see Danny there. Is Tasia there? I don't see how. So Danny, if you're okay, can you go ahead and get going for us?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much, Danny.
Yep. Hello, my name is Dan Madonia. I am from Chambly, Illinois. I'm a fifth-year senior at UW La Crosse. I'm studying organizational and professional communication with a minor in leadership development. I want to start by saying thank you to the board for not only allowing me to share my story, but also for addressing the issue of mental health seriously. One thing that I have learned through my own experiences is that mental health is something that many college students struggle with. During my first year at UW La Crosse, I noticed a significant change in my mental health. I struggled to live my everyday life as I took interest in the hobbies and daily activities I once dearly loved. I knew something was not right, but I struggled to overcome the toxic stigma surrounding mental health and did not want to reach out for help. It was during this time that I attempted to take my own life. After I recovered, I required to attend counseling on campus at UW La Crosse Counseling and Testing Center. This was some of the best counseling I've ever received in my life. Being able to see the counselor every week helped me significantly. Having frequent visits allowed me to stay focused on my life by setting daily goals to help me overcome my depression. Fall semester was probably the darkest point in my life in terms of the severity of my mental health. I looked into getting counseling again, but unfortunately, there was a shortage of counselors at the time on campus. I then turned to off-campus options for counseling, but was told by several clinics that they were not taking in any new clients. I relied on past counseling sessions and experiences to cope with my mental health throughout the semester. During the semester, I visited the on-campus health center and spoke to a doctor about starting medication for the first time in my life. This was the first time I have ever considered medication for my depression, let alone my mental health disorder in general. Receiving medicine at the time through UWL helped me drastically, and I do not regret it one bit. Today, I still manage my mental health and struggle with it regularly, as battling with dark thoughts aren't the easiest, especially during this pandemic. But I have realized one of the best ways for me to cope with my depression is to serve as an advocate for the community. I try to take every opportunity to share my story because hearing these stories from your peers lets students know that they aren't alone. I strongly encourage the UW system to promote counseling on their campuses, along with also encouraging more mental health related events to be held as well. For example, focus groups, stomp out stigma related events, discussions, etc. Continuing to build off these steps will not only ensure that help is readily available to everyone, it will also establish a much more connected community by normalizing the concept of mental health. It helped me significantly, and I know it will help other students too, as long as we work together to destigmatize mental health. Thank you for working.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you for having the courage and to come forth and to tell your story and to really share it. Yeah. And we see that Tasia is here now too, so we'll introduce back to Tasia Champion, who's now joining us. Go ahead, Tasia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tasia Champion. I am a fifth-year senior at UW-Oshkosh, majoring in Human Services and Leadership, and will be graduating in December. I'm currently a lead staff member at our local homeless shelter and an intern at Webster Stanley Middle School. Since my first semester at UW-Oshkosh, I have used and benefited from group therapy sessions, wellness workshops, a trauma retreat, biofeedback therapy, individualized therapy, our rejuvenation room, which happened to be my favorite, and the Just Breathe room. Group therapy have allowed me to realize how common mental health is on campus and made me feel less ashamed. During the pandemic, I participated in virtual group sessions and individual sessions to maintain my mental health. The virtual sessions have helped me maintain healthy coping mechanism and tend to my mental health during this stressful time. I developed mental health issues after losing my mother at the age of 11 and experiencing childhood abuse. It was challenging to receive adequate mental health services due to the stigma it held in African American communities. During my first semester of college, I experienced a traumatic incident from an abusive ex-partner on campus that triggered emotions and feelings that were suppressed for years. I experienced a wide range of emotions and suicidal ideation after this traumatic incident, so I decided to seek help through the counseling center on campus. After my first appointment, I made the decision to voluntarily admit myself into psychiatric inpatient care. I was hospitalized for 7 days and was formally diagnosed with major depression disorder, bipolar disorder, anxiety, and PTSD. During my role as a community advisor in residence life during second year, I went through a manic episode and made an impulsive decision to drop out of school and resign from the CA position. It was apparent I was in the midst of a severe nervous breakdown, so I decided to voluntarily admit myself into psychiatric inpatient care again. This time, I was hospitalized for 5 days and was prescribed higher dosages of medication. The counseling staff at UW-Oshkosh have played a significant factor in my choice to continue my education and receive the mental health support that I need to succeed. They encouraged me to stay in school and believed in my ability to graduate college despite the challenges I faced with my mental health. My counselor and I constructed a treatment plan from that point, and it has been successful ever since. It has made a huge impact on my progress. For the last 3 semesters, I have made the Dean's List with a 4.0 GPA and honor roll list with a 3.4 and 3.7 GPA. I have become an inducted member of National Society of Leadership and Success. After graduating in December, I will be attending graduate school next fall to pursue a master's of social work. As a graduating senior, I can honestly say counseling has made me a better person and allowed me to maximize my potential. Through counseling, I have learned that my mental health is just as important as my physical health. To Dr. Munin and Sandy, thank you for your continuous non-judgmental support throughout my college and healing journey. Thank you.
Yes. So thank you so much to both students. It was such a wonderful thing that you were able to share. So, so if you just stay with us, because I'm sure at some point there may be some questions for you. And now I'm going to turn it back to John, please.
All right, I have to compose myself because that is a tough act to follow. I feel like we need to applaud our students for the courage. It takes a lot of courage, as they both indicated, to overcome stigma, to even seek help, and then to be able to publicly come before all of us and share their experiences and some really tough times that they experienced. That just really takes a lot. So I want to thank them. Mm-hmm. And I do hope that you get to ask them some questions too. So clearly, I hope you've seen that the work of our counseling centers makes a significant difference in our students' lives. The growing needs we've identified also means that we must sustain our attention toward the work. So next slide, please. I'd like to discuss where do we go next. So the behavioral health work groups that we've referenced have charted out recommendations that can keep us busy for quite a while and help us make inroads on all three tiers of the comprehensive model guiding our work. The heaviest lift right now is to right-size our behavioral health staffing. While clinical services alone are not going to solve our growing needs, they do constitute a critical foundation to ensure that students who need it can count on a basic level of care that is both accessible in a timely manner and of high quality. As you've seen and heard today, perhaps most strongly from our students, doing so can literally make the difference between a student remaining enrolled and leaving school. I summarized a few of the staffing priorities earlier. They include making progress toward the aspirational goal of 1 counselor for every 1,000 students. Depending on what funding might be available, our highest priority would be to bring our most understaffed campuses in line with the rest. We have 4 campuses that currently do not meet the 1 to 1,500 standards, so those would be the ones that I'm talking about. Also, as mentioned before, students would benefit from more diversity among the professionals who serve them. Centers recognize this need, and it fits perfectly with President Thompson's priority to amplify our focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Third, case managers often work with the students who bring with them the most complex needs. These students can consume significant staff time, which is important. A case manager can help free up time for other staff to provide standard levels of care to more students. On the medical side of the house, we know that we have a shortage of psychiatry hours that may require a creative solution of contracting with telepsychiatry services to serve multiple campuses simultaneously. This is because there's a shortage of psychiatrists around the country and within the state. And then finally, when it comes to staffing priorities, I believe the future is in creating programs and partnerships that address the well-being of all students. This is tier 3 in our framework, which I'll say a little bit more about in closing. The second bullet on the screen is a pandemic-related priority that has been identified to provide updated technology to support telecounseling. As you heard, some centers were not well prepared from a technology perspective to make this transition. We are currently pursuing a funding option to help them in this regard so that service quality is not compromised for our students. In addition to diversifying our counseling staff, our Tier 2 work group recommended supporting recurring cultural competency training for behavioral health providers, as well as all faculty and staff. Putting some structure around this priority will be one of my next tasks. Next, we are indebted to President Thompson for recently agreeing to once again fund system-wide administration of the National College Health Assessment. This is the population survey that produces the data presented in past board meetings and is scheduled to be done every 3 years to stay on top of student trends and evaluate the impact of our campus-wide and system-wide efforts. Next, the Tier 2 work group also recommended supporting professional development and training in 2 additional areas. First of all, for our behavior intervention or care teams, who daily receive reports and manage the response to our most significant students of concern. And second, general mental health awareness and suicide prevention training for faculty, staff, and students, so that our entire campus communities can become part of a support and referral network that helps identify student needs at their earliest stages and connect students to appropriate resources. Finally, you've heard us say that wellness and prevention efforts are key to understanding and addressing the behavioral health needs on our campuses over the long term. Who among us wouldn't benefit from enhancing our well-being, improving our coping skills, and building our resilience in response to the stressors of life? Sandy articulated this so well. This area right now in our strategy is the least well-formed at the time, but there are some very shining examples within the UW system and nationally that we can look to as models to build this over time. In closing, by building this and sustaining a comprehensive approach, we believe that we will not only continue to contribute to the critical goals of student persistence and graduation, but also to the loftier goals of helping our graduates live more fulfilling lives that make meaningful contributions to society. And I believe, and I think you would all agree, that all of our students deserve this opportunity. And with that, we would be happy to take any additional questions.
Thank you, Dr. Actor. Thank you, Dr. Wesley. To Danny and Tasia, incredibly powerful presentations. You're both intending to graduate this year. You've overcome serious adversity and you've persevered. And you should be incredibly proud of yourselves, as I know all of us as members of this board are. And thank you for helping us shine a spotlight on the importance of the kind of counseling that you're receiving even during these difficult COVID times. At this time, let me ask members of the Board of Regents questions for our panelists, our experts, and our students.
This is Regent Hall. I just wanted to, first of all, congratulate the team. The work that you are doing for our students is so important. And to Tasia and Danny, thank you for just your resiliency, your persistence, passion around staying in school, getting your education, and your trust in our university to really help you through this time. Is there anything else that we're missing? When you think about all of the supports that we are trying to provide during this time, academically and emotionally and socially, what else might we do, or what else might we be missing that could also be helpful? And I'd love to hear something from both of you.
Hello, that's an interesting question. For me, I feel like making the counseling centers on campus more visible, because I became aware of the counseling center through a school tour, but I wasn't aware of the counseling center to the point to go to the counseling center, if that makes sense. So when my traumatic incident happened my freshman year, that's when I learned and developed insight into all of the services that the counseling center had to offer. So just bringing awareness to the counseling centers on campus, I think, would be really helpful, because believe it or not, there are a lot of students on campus who do not know that there are counseling centers, or that there is mental health assistance and support on campus. So that would be one thing I think will be very beneficial to students.
Okay, thank you. Danny?
Well, I mean, I guess my only thing was last year at lacrosse, they had a very rough time with getting counselors and getting workers there. So it caused a lot of mayhem, and people were very upset, and people were kind of just, kind of being rough on the counseling testing center at lacrosse. So obviously that's, it's jobs and stuff. So there's more that went into that. But I think if, lacrosse and just some other sport possibly can just really stay on top of like making sure they have counselors to have people talk to, I think that's really important for people.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Regent Bogost.
I just want to say thank you so much to all of you, and Danny and Tasia, unbelievable, your courage. And I just want to say that you probably don't realize this, but every time you tell your story, you really are helping everybody that you're talking to. So you have no idea the impact that you have, but thank you very much. And to what Tasia, what you said, as far as the gatekeepers, I just wanted maybe perhaps you, Dr. Actor, and the other part of the team, I'm just curious if there's an outreach, because I think there's a lot of faculty, staff, students that want to say something, maybe want to talk about and even say where the counseling center is. And I've talked to friends of mine that are faculty, and I mentioned to them, well, why don't you, talk to the student about going to counseling? And they seem not unaware, but it's not the first thing in their wheelhouse. And I'm just wondering if that's part of, like, when you listed the bullet point of gatekeepers, how do we get, and even UWPD, all the police departments, I know there's not enough services, so sometimes people are reluctant to put that out there, but students and need to talk to one another, faculty needs to talk to one another, and the dialogue needs to keep in the forefront of all of us. So I just wanted to maybe hear from you about how we approach more of the gatekeepers to really get people aware.
Yeah, that is such an important aspect. I think Sandy will be able to talk about it on her campus as well. But you know, one of the things that strikes me doing this work for a long time is a lot of people don't pay attention to the services available till they need them, right? And so we try to do a lot of outreach efforts. Something that we did at our campus at Stout when I was there was created some folders that had kind of all the resources that faculty, staff, students could refer students to, so that it was a kind of a readily available sort of thing. And we also tried to do training, and we filled the room. There were faculty and staff are hungry for this kind of gatekeeper information, but we often didn't have time. In the priority setting that we have to do, serving students directly is going to always top the list. And so doing some of those gatekeeper trainings kind of goes down the line. So in looking toward the future, if we can find something that is scalable, which may end up being yet another online training, but at least something that is, you know, available in real time when faculty and staff need it, to make sure that they're feeling comfortable having conversations with students, and then know what the resources are and how to refer them.
I think I can speak a little bit as well too. That on our campus, every week we provide bystander intervention training, JED Foundation suicide prevention training, all different kinds of gatekeeper training. So that's always ongoing, and I know a lot of the other campuses are doing that. So we have a lot of opportunities, but I agree with what John said. Often they don't look at that until it's needed. I noticed for me what's been really beneficial is I've been invited a lot more into faculty presentations, into faculty departments, and that's been very beneficial. But I think one other thing I want to bring up is like a student care team approach. That at Oshkosh, we have a really strong student care team. And so we've got the Dean of Students, we have Student Health, we have Res Life, we have the University Police, all kinds of people on there. And so it's not just the counseling center trying to get the word out about the counseling center. Like, we work together as a whole team to support the student, so that if there's a student who's struggling in residence life who's never heard of the counseling center, well, they come to the student care team if they're struggling in some way that we're aware of, and then we reach out. So it's, I think, a collaborative approach like that, where it's several different departments on campus, has become like a vital thing for us. And, you know, I think we couldn't do nearly as well as we do unless we had the student care team.
And I would just like to echo.
Let's go to Regent Woodmansee, and then we'll go to Regent Cologne. Olivia?
Thank you so much. Before I start, Dr. Wesley, did you have something to add really quick there?
I was just simply going to echo what my colleagues have said, but also bring to the attention of all of our participants in our regions as well. This is a community effort. It is definitely the partnership that comes from our University Health and Counseling Services, our behavior intervention teams, our campus police, residence life, dean of students, but we are also all, no matter what position you're in, responsible for combating the stigma that comes along with mental health issues and concerns. And so we're all working against that and have to incorporate the normalcy of engaging in dialogue, in increasing and encouraging the participation of, you know, seeking out counseling and making sure that this is a part of our everyday conversation and dialogue. So I just wanted to add that piece in there as well.
All right, thank you. I just want to first thank you all so much for all of your hard work, and also Danny and Tasia for your presentations. I know this can be very scary as a student speaking in front of the Brady Bunch of screens, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do that and to share your stories. I think this hasn't come at a better time, especially with, as we're talking about spring of 2021, and so many of our schools are starting to cancel their spring breaks and kind of remove that gap for students, and what that will do, the impact of students' mental health while not having a break in classes. So I'm just curious if some of our student behavioral health experts can kind of talk about what this impact will have on students, and how you will kind of preemptively work to make sure you're engaging even more with students to make sure that they are comfortable with their mental health without this break next semester. Thank you.
Sandy, would you like to take that one?
Sure, sure. Well, interesting. At my last institution, we actually engaged in some research to know about doing a fall break. Was a fall break important to have as part of, did it impact students' ability to succeed better with their classes? Did it impact wellness? And it did show that having some type of, even if it's a day break, did help with that. So I really can't speak to whether or not, different campuses are going to have spring break or not. I think there's a whole lot of things that probably are going into that. But I do get a little concerned about not having some level of break, even if it's just a day break or something where they still stay on campus, but it's some level where they're just kind of off duty, to be concerned about school. And I think that a lot of the research out there has supported that students do need at least small breaks within their calendar year to be able to kind of regroup.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments, and I would guess that campuses that are doing that, for obvious safety reasons, are probably also thinking about how can we keep students engaged outside of the classroom. And so to echo some of what Sandy said earlier about, social connections being one of the most important buffers for students keeping mentally healthy, finding ways, even if it does have to be somewhat virtual, for students to stay connected and engage with one another, engaged in their activities, I think will be critically important if we decide to just go, 15 weeks without a break.
Regent Cologne.
Thank you, President Peterson. I just wanted to also thank Tasia and Danny for their courage. Through your testimony, I saw greatness, I saw humility, and I saw leadership. And you are going to inspire others to follow you. So thank you for sharing your stories. Now, I ask you to continue to share them, because there are others that you will inspire to yourself. And for faculty and staff, we talked about connection being a very important thing now more than ever for obvious reasons. And it's difficult, right? But are there other creative ways where, maybe it's a social hour or a coffee hour, where new students can meet each other and develop friendships, especially those incoming freshmen that want to have a college experience and maybe they don't know people on campus, but those connections, those friendships are really important for them to have a successful experience. Any ideas or thoughts around that?
I could maybe speak to that a little bit, and if anyone else wants to too. I agree that we've really it's a new challenge that counseling centers have had. It's like, so how do we get them even more connected? Because we knew ahead of time, before the pandemic hit, engagement was still an issue across college campuses. That connection was already there, but now it's even stronger concern. So one of the things that our counseling center that we've done is we've started doing some unique things of 4 days a week. We provide some, something you had said, a virtual social hour. So we do, we have virtually have dinner together, we have a mindfulness night. We're just kind of having a night to do mindfulness if that's something that you want to practice or learn. We have a night to do a DIY thing of learning different artistic, just different things to do. We have a night of music or actually even just watching your favorite TV show together, So I know other campuses are doing the same, that we're just trying to find creative ways in which we can offer virtual opportunities for students to at least just talk to each other. But it's hard for them to even talk to each other or share interests, which is such an important part, because we know college, of course, the academic part is number one, but that personal growth is so important, and it comes through relational and all those kinds of things, learning your interests. So we're trying to find ways to do that. And a lot of our campuses in the student life section too are doing so many unique things as well too. I think we're all trying so hard, but the challenges remain.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for our panelists? Okay, hearing none, I'd just like to make some closing comments. And I do have a question for you, Sandy. You talked about the importance of resources and the need, John, you talked about for additional counselors. I think about how difficult it is to onboard, counselors currently. The demand is there. As you know, we as a board, and certainly through the leadership of President Thompson, feel compelled to make additional investment in staffing. So I'd like you to provide just a quick comment on how you see staffing recruitment going. And then is there any ability, given the challenges that we face and the needs that we've had to pivot to virtual, that you can combine counseling to hit multiple campuses through our existing staff, if I can say it like that? Can you just react to that, Sandy?
Sure. A couple of things there. So I lost 2 staff members through the pandemic from some concerns around that. So I am actually onboarding 2 new staff people next week. So there is some uniqueness to that in this situation. So we're doing very intentional things as far as to partner people up to get them to feel to be part of a team. At my center, we really focus on wellness. And as part of that, we want to make sure that we do things as teams together. So we do like those same like social connecting things as I was just talking about and trying to get students to engage. We do that on our team as well too, because there is that point where you have to be able to, in a coaching center, it's a team. It's not just a staff or work, because we have to be together in everything we do. So there is some uniqueness to onboarding, but I feel confident that you're able to do that. And the question about like, as far as like using some telehealth and some other abilities to do that, I think that telehealth will be part of what we do in our future. I think that it does reach students in different ways than we, like our distance learners, for instance. We've always had a challenge with folks who are in other states perhaps, or just far away from our campuses, that would be beneficial. Or some students are just so incredibly anxious, it's difficult to walk through those doors. And so I see telehealth really being something for that. Do I see it as being able to replace a person? I have to be honest and say I don't. I think that it's a very different reach, and it will reach people who we haven't been able to reach before, but we will still have that increase of people who are going to need that in-person, face-to-face type of approach, from my opinion.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
John, I think you might be on mute.
I would add one thing in terms of your second part of your question about the ability to serve students, with staff across other campuses. An example of that that's really come to light during the pandemic, just a week or 2 ago, I attended a very great session from UW Superior's Center for Mindfulness and Wellbeing. If you haven't checked that out, go online. They've got a great thing going there. That's one of the bright spots I was talking about, examples in the system that might be able to be upscaled, because they're doing everything virtual like we all are right now. And so I think many counseling center directors were able to attend some of their workshops, which provided, it's not counseling, but it actually provides some very helpful skills and reminders of how to be resilient in tough times. They are bringing in national speakers that talk about evidence-based practices. So I think there are things like that that can probably utilize the resources we already have and spread across the whole system. But when it comes to that one-on-one counseling, it is hard to replace for students that need that, whether it's virtual or in person. It really is about that relationship. And groups can serve more students all at once, but even that, the research would say groups have to be of a fairly reasonable size for to be manageable and to be effective.
Thank you. Well, as you know, we're in the second year of this journey, and I think it's a journey that will continue for a long period of time. We are committed to making sure you've got the right resources to do your level best to make sure that our students and our staff are adequately and frankly resoundingly cared for. Every time we see these presentations, the statistics stay with us. It's what motivates us through stories like we heard today, that we're doing the right thing for the system at the right time. And so for that, I'd ask all of our board to give a round of applause to our presenters. thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, John, Sandy. Yeah.
So among the many disruptions resulting from the pandemic, we missed the opportunity to formally say farewell to several of our Regent colleagues whose terms on the board have concluded earlier this year. Now with the fall semester well underway, I'd like to take some time for us to recognize two of these individuals, Regent Emeritus Gerald Whitburn and Regent Emeritus Jason Plante. We'll start with Regent Jerry Whitburn. Over the course of his more than 8 years on the board, Jerry was always an ardent advocate for the UW system. He wanted to make sure the UW system serves its students and is accountable to the public. Unfortunately, Jerry can't be with us here today, but we'd like to publicly express our gratitude for his service to the UW system and the state of Wisconsin. President Thompson, you'd like to say a few words to begin.
I would just like to congratulate Jerry. I had the privilege to hire Jerry, and he was one of my cabinet secretaries. And Jerry's had a very distinguished career, both at the state level, the national level. He was secretary in 2 different state administrations, one in Massachusetts and one in Wisconsin. He also ran a very successful insurance business up north. And he's just always a go-getter, getting the job done. And he loved the university, loved being a regent. And I would just like to say, as somebody that had the privilege to work with Jerry very closely over many years, congratulations, Jerry, on a job well done.
Thank you, President Thompson. At this time, I'd ask Vice President Grebe to provide some brief remarks and to present the board's resolution of appreciation for Regent Emeritus Jerry Whitburn.
Thank you. As Regent President Peterson mentioned, one element of serving on this board that I think most regents have enjoyed in the past, when we were not conducting our business remotely and were able to be in the same place at the same time, has been the tradition of taking a few moments to celebrate the contributions of former members of the Board of Regents and giving them the time to share their own reflections on their service, on the board, and on our system. Sometimes those reflections have included admonitions to the continuing regents to take action. Sometimes they've included an overt expression of appreciation for the people and institutions that make up our system. And sometimes, in the case of Chuck Pruitt, they've included an unforgettable celebration of the chicken pot pie luncheons that used to be served here at Van Huy's. For those of you who weren't there, it's worth finding the video. While we can't have that same experience today, I hope we're able to rekindle that tradition soon. So before I share the resolution celebrating the substantial contributions of our former colleague Jerry Whitburn, I hope you'll indulge me while I share a few very brief thoughts separate and apart from his long list of accomplishments. The primary thought that comes to mind for me is that I miss Jerry Whitburn. I don't miss him in the way that you miss someone who is no longer with us in the metaphysical sense, but I miss having him around the table with us for at least 3 reasons. First, I miss learning from Jerry. Jerry served as a kind of unofficial mentor to many of us, not in an ideological way, and not because he told us what to do, although he'd always offer advice if asked. Rather, we learned a lot by watching the way Jerry filled the role of a regent. We learned by listening to him and by noting when he spoke and how he spoke and when he didn't. We learned by recognizing that he was always prepared and always informed. We learned by observing the breadth of the relationships he developed and maintained with leaders all across the system. And we learned by witnessing his obvious devotion to the well-being of our university. Second, I miss the fact that Jerry made us better. He made us better as a group of regents, and for many of us, he made us better as individual regents. He did this by demonstrating the qualities that I just mentioned, but also by demanding it, not directly, but by expecting it without articulating it, by asking tough questions that forced us to be better, by not tolerating lackadaisical service, and by pushing everyone to take a step toward goodness, as he would put it. And finally, I'm guessing that I'm not alone in sharing that I miss his companionship on the board. In his gentlemanly manner, he was always quick to ask a colleague how they were doing away from this role, quick to know something about why a colleague might answer that question in a given way, quick to make a colleague smile, and generous with his time and his dinner invitations, which, by the way, could range from an oak panel dining room to a Culver's drive-through, sometimes during the same meeting. When I first met Jerry more than 30 years ago, I certainly didn't call him Jerry. He was Mr. Whitburn and eventually Secretary Whitburn. I consider myself fortunate that today I call Jerry a friend. With that, I'll read the resolution of appreciation. Whereas Jerry Whitburn dedicated more than 8 years of exemplary service as a regent to the University of Wisconsin system from November 2011 to January 2020. And whereas Jerry's commitment and dedication to the UW system has made it a better place for students to succeed and even more accountable to the public. And whereas Jerry served as an engaged member of numerous standing committees, including chairing and vice chairing both the Education and Audit committees, chairing the Business and Finance Committee, and serving as a member of the committees for Capital Planning and Budget and Research, Economic Development and Innovation. And whereas Jerry served on the Personnel Matters Review Committee, the Committee on Student Discipline and other student appeals, and as a Regent member of the Hospital Authority Board. And whereas Jerry helped select top UW leaders, chairing the Special Chancellor Search Committee for UW Oshkosh and serving as a member of the Search Committee for UW Green Bay. And whereas Jerry worked to publicly honor and reward the commitment of extraordinary UW educators as a member of the Academic Staff Excellence Awards Committee. And whereas Jerry is a proud alumnus of the UW system, having earned a bachelor's in political science and history from UW Oshkosh and a master's of arts in political science from UW-Madison. And whereas Jerry was a public servant who always advocated for Wisconsin students and the integrity of higher education. Be it therefore resolved that the Board of Regents of the University of Wisconsin system hereby offers thanks and commendation to Gerald Whitburn for his many life achievements, his outstanding support of students of all ages, and his exceptional service to the citizens of Wisconsin.
Thank you very much, Vice President Grebe. Next, we'd like to recognize Regent Emeritus Jason Plante, whose term on the board has also concluded. In his 2 years as our colleague, taking over former Regent Emeritus Margaret Farrow's seat, he was a consistent advocate for providing high quality and affordable education to the people of Wisconsin. Jason made a big impact in a short period of time. Jason never hesitated to take on important board challenges, serve on search or other committees, often volunteering to do so, which made my job a little easier. He demonstrated a strong commitment to improving educational experiences for our students, and we're extremely grateful for the opportunity to have worked with him. Jason is also not able to be with us today. However, it's my pleasure to publicly recognize his service by reading our resolution of appreciation for Regent Emeritus Jason Plante. Whereas Jason R. Plante dedicated more than 2 years of exemplary service as a Regent of the University of Wisconsin system from March 2018 to May 2020. And whereas Jason served as a thoughtful member of the Education Committee, demonstrating a commitment to improving the educational experience for students. And whereas Jason offered a valuable perspective as a member of the Personnel Matters Review Committee, including chairing it for 1 year. And whereas through serving on the Capital Planning and Budget Committee as both a member and vice chair, Jason worked to increase the UW system's efficient stewardship of fiscal and capital resources and its responsiveness to the educational needs of all Wisconsin citizens. And whereas Jason helped select the next top leader for UW Stout, chairing the Special Regent Chancellor Search Committee for the UW system's Polytechnic University. And whereas Jason has worked to publicly honor and reward the commitment of extraordinary UW educators, serving 2 years on the Teaching Excellence Awards Committee. And whereas throughout his time as a regent, Jason has proven to be a consistent advocate for providing high quality and affordable education. Be it therefore resolved that the Board of Regents of the University of Wisconsin System hereby commends Jason R. Plante for his service to the UW system and outstanding commitment to higher education in Wisconsin. Congratulations again to both Regents Whitburn and Plante. Finally, the board would like to recognize former UW System President Ray Cross, who is joining us here this afternoon, for his exceptional service to the University of Wisconsin.
In many ways, Ray
in 43 years in higher education. To set the stage, we have a brief video that we'd now like to share.
Ray, I want to congratulate you on a 42-year career in higher education. You've certainly made a difference.
In many ways, Ray's job has been an impossible job, but he has always taken on the tasks as the consummate professional.
It was not always easy balancing the interests of legislators as well as university faculty and staff and administrators, but you did an incredible job, and you were always so patient and listened and to all sides.
You have survived and thrived through some big changes and some big challenges in your career. Something I admire and for which you should be proud.
I think with Ray's guidance, the system has shown our partners, both in the legislature and in the Wisconsin business community, how application of the Wisconsin idea benefits everybody who lives here. And Ray has been just the right guy to deliver that message.
I know how hard he has worked to seek out input from the business community around the state and across economic sectors. More importantly, Ray has listened and acted on what he has learned from those meetings, and as a result, the state's economy and workforce is better, stronger, and more competitive.
Ray took opportunities, he acted always for the best interests of the University of Wisconsin, and his efforts have moved that institution forward.
Extended campus and the UW flexible option wouldn't exist without your strong vision and support. Thousands and thousands of adults wouldn't have their UW degrees without you.
University of Wisconsin-Whitewater is a legacy place, and I want to thank you, Ray, for giving me an opportunity to be the chancellor at this wonderful institution.
Our state and higher education in our state, and particularly the students in our state, are better off because you passed our way. You took a turn into Wisconsin and you made a difference. And for that, we are eternally grateful.
Ray has been a tremendous friend, a tremendous leader, and an all-around great person. I'm privileged to call him my friend. I am happy for him. I'm proud of what he accomplished as president of the University of Wisconsin system.
Your common sense approach, your thoughtful approach, just really, you were just terrific to work with. And I told many in many conversations that you were truly an asset. And we were so blessed to have you serve in that position.
Things that I remember about Ray, one of them in particular that really sticks with me. One time he said, "You train animals, you educate people." Train animals, educate people. That was his profound sense of education. That really stuck with me.
He's the smartest person I've ever worked for, and there's not even a close second place. It's the combination of knowledge, just the things that he knows, along with his wisdom, the way he applies it. You see his brain just constantly working and wondering, why.
When we toured UW Oshkosh together, the students were showing us the beehive protectors, and it was really nice to see you get excited and go over and give them some engineering tips on how that product could work even better. And I thought that really showed the dedication that you had to the students and to all the students in the state of Wisconsin.
To see him engage with students working on their projects, demonstrating them, getting into conversation about how things work, why they're doing it a certain way, have they thought about things like this, would they consider going like this, getting into one-on-one conversations with them. That is an example of what? Humility. And that's something that I really hope I will always take away from having worked with Ray.
I've always admired his humility. Not only is he the same person, whether he's talking to a business executive or a student or a regent or a new staff hire, but he treats them with the same dignity, and it's genuine, and it's so obviously genuine that I think that's why he's as widely respected as he is.
What am I going to miss about Ray? I'm just going to miss Ray.
You've been immensely helpful for so many of us, and we're going to miss you, and have always fond memories. Thanks for everything you've done.
Ray, on behalf of Extended Campus, we wish you and Miriam all the best in retirement and look forward to what you're going to accomplish in this coming next chapter for your life.
I can't thank you enough for all that you've done, and I wish you great joy and happiness in all your future endeavors.
So, miigwech from Lakota Ojibwe Tribal College, Ray, and we wish you the very best.
I know I speak for all my fellow chancellors when I say, Ray, thank you so much for your outstanding leadership over the years. It has been a privilege and pleasure to be your colleague. Please come and visit the campuses, even in retirement. You have many, many friends here. Congratulations on a great career and all the best in retirement.
Have the best time of your life. You're just a great person and a great couple, and we salute you and wish the best for you in the future.
Could not be more proud to have been able to work for you over the past several years. I consider you a friend, a colleague, a mentor, and a great boss.
Just wanted to say congratulations on your retirement. We've done an awful lot of things in the last 6 years, and you've made considerable contributions to UW. Oftentimes you'd call me and say, I hope this isn't going to be a pain. But it turns out I've saved all of those up, and I'm at Emeritus Hospital this morning having UW doctors remove my gallbladder. So with that, I guess I can just simply say all the best in your retirement to you and Miriam. Good luck on the next chapter in your life.
So, I'm sorry that he's decided to retire. But Ray is one guy who actually deserves to rest on his laurels. But Dave, there's one thing I really don't understand, and that is how we've managed to keep Ray out of the entertainment industry, because he is such a good-looking fella.
Ray has been a very strong leader. He's been a partner, and he's been a friend. I want to thank him again for his leadership, and I want to congratulate him on a well-deserved retirement.
Congratulations, Ray. You've taught me more by your example than I can express in just a couple of minutes.
On a personal note, I just want to say directly to Ray, remember you can retire from a position. You can never retire from being a friend.
Well, a couple of things to clear the air. First, that was due on deadline. My wife, sitting next to me as my COVID patient steward, said, "Don't you owe that video?" So it was filmed in one take.
Prior to anesthesia.
Pretty good. Prior to anesthesia, yep. It was purely a local. Then secondly, for my colleagues behind me, I do understand that there is a front-facing video, so hopefully you're not just getting my best side. So with that, it's a distinct honor for me to recognize Ray Cross for an incredible career serving higher education across a gamut of institutions comprising the Academy for over 4 decades. While President Cross made significant impacts at all the institutions where we served, we are most fortunate that he served this system to have Ray complete his service with us as the 7th president of this prestigious university system. An accomplished career, to say the least, But President Cross inherited a challenged UW system when he assumed the role of president. Ray worked tirelessly with chancellors and UW system staff to restore it to a strong financial and operational position that has proved critical for our current and future success. As you heard in the video, President Cross has an uncanny ability to connect with people, whether it be faculty, administration, students, legislators, representatives of the media, or the countless Wisconsinites he encountered along his journey. In my mind, President Cross was at his absolute best when he was heralding the accomplishments of the UW system. Whether in legislative hearings, at All in Wisconsin tour events on campuses, or in any public forum, Ray Cross exudes authenticity and professional grace. President Cross presided over some difficult budget years, for which his shins still maintain a few scars. But he also succeeded in securing the largest capital budget request in UW system history. President Cross was the architect of the consolidation and restructuring of our two-year campuses, folding them into our four-year receiving schools in what many perceive as his legacy and finest achievement. It was also a bold and forward-looking reform proposal that came at exactly the right time for the UW system. President Cross has led the system with integrity, grit, and compassion to make all of our universities better, more accountable, and to highlight the exceptional impacts our campuses and our people have on the future success of the state of Wisconsin. President Cross has been an inspiration to me. I've never seen a leader work so hard after announcing their retirement to make such a difference. Ray led all of our testing research efforts behind the scenes as we worked to learn all we needed toward combating COVID-19 on the campuses. President Cross provided thorough guidance and counsel to me on diversity scholarship initiatives and what more we can be doing to advance our diversity and inclusion efforts on our UW campuses. President Cross made himself available daily to assist President Thompson and nightly with his onboarding and to show Governor Thompson the ropes of the UW system. He also assisted with talent reviews and progression opportunities for UW system staff. In closing, Ray Cross leaves the UW system with numerous accomplishments, national recognitions on important topics like closing the achievement gaps, investing in behavioral health for our students and faculty, and has set the bar so very high for the next series of leaders who will follow in his footsteps. Most importantly, and perhaps most impressive, is how Ray Cross maintains such a strong moral compass as a leader and educator. Ray is a wonderful husband, father, grandfather, confidant, and friend to so many. He tells it like it is, and he works hard to change things he knows he can improve. We, along with the UW system and the people of the state of Wisconsin, owe President Cross a deep debt of gratitude for his service, commitment to excellence, and the numerous contributions he has brought forward as our 7th president. Thank you, Ray Cross, for your service and friendship. You'll be sincerely missed. I wish you and Miriam nothing but the best as you embark on your retirement. President Thompson, I believe you'd have a few words that you'd like to say.
Thank you very much, President. Two presidents, President Drew and President Ray. You go through life and there's always some individual, some person that stands out. Some individual who excels in virtue, diplomacy, intelligence, and accomplishments. An individual that you want to respect, you want to emulate, you want to follow. That's Ray Cross. Ray Cross is an individual that has always led. Whether an engineer in Vietnam, whether a scholar, or whether growing up on a dairy farm, he has the hands to prove it. Whether an individual comes out of academia, says he wants to do more. He wants to lead. He wants to be a chancellor. And then he says, I would like to lead the institution. That's an individual who is dedicated, who's passionate, not only intelligent, but dedicated to accomplishing the best. That's Ray Cross. Ray Cross is an individual who people like, they respect, and they want to follow. Ray Cross has dedicated his life to his family, Miriam, his wife, his children, and to his students. If he could, he would be the father to all of them. He likes to meet them. He likes to shake their hands. He likes to find out how they're doing. And he always wants this institution, this University of Wisconsin, to be better. Better for the students, better for the faculty, and better for the state of Wisconsin. That's the guy that we here today say thank you. Thank you, Ray Cross, for who you are, what you've done, and what you still do. He had an operation on his arm. Most people would stay home and convalescent. He comes in just about every day, gives us hell that we deserve, tells us what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right. That's a sign of a real leader, a real fantastic human being. And I said, Ray, we got to pay you. And he said, no, I don't want to get paid. I want to come and I want to be the #1 volunteer for the University of Wisconsin system. So, Mr. Volunteer, Mr. Leader, Mr. President, thank you. Thank you for everything you've done. And thank you for what you stand for, your principles, your ethics, your intelligence. And thank you for your dedication. You're a hell of a guy. We love you.
At this time, it's my honor to present the board's resolution of appreciation for UW System President Ray Cross. Whereas Ray Cross has served with exceptional distinction as the 7th president of the University of Wisconsin System. No foreshadowing, we could use something like you right now. From February 2014 through June 2020, capping off a 43-year career in higher education. And whereas Ray championed creating a new vision for Wisconsin's public university system, one that has collective impact, adds value to the institution and to the state, values the diversity of institutional type, and is respected and admired in Wisconsin and throughout the world, not just as the University of Wisconsin, but also as the University for Wisconsin. Whereas Ray led the 2020 Forward Strategic Framework planning process to leverage the university's people and resources to reinvigorate Wisconsin's economy and enhance its quality of life, a process that engaged nearly 5,000 citizens and sought broad input from stakeholder and expert groups of faculty, industry, community, and legislative leaders around the state. And whereas Ray directed the creation of the 2020 Forward Strategic Framework Report Card, which provides information about the process and progress of the framework's system-level priorities of improving 4 areas: the educational pipeline, university experience, business and community mobilization, and operational excellence. And whereas under Ray's tenure, the UW system launched the Career Connect website to connect Wisconsin employers with students for internships, job shadowing, and careers so that more graduates stay in Wisconsin to become an integral part of the state's economy and communities. Whereas Ray's tenure oversaw a first-of-its-kind data analysis of graduate outcomes indicating UW system graduates earn a median salary of nearly $50,000 annually just 1 year after securing their bachelor's degrees, illustrating that a UW system education is one of the greatest values in higher education and its lifelong benefits are priceless. Whereas Ray directed a 2018 economic impact study conducted by North Star which showed the UW system contributes $24 billion to the state's economy each year, a 23-fold return on Wisconsin's investment in the university. And whereas Ray led the restructuring of the UW system to expand access to higher education, maintain affordable tuition, and increase opportunities for students by joining the 2-year campuses with the system's comprehensive and research universities, maintaining mutually enriching economic and cultural connections between the campuses and their local communities. And whereas Ray and the Board of Regents launched the All in Wisconsin tour to strengthen relationships with business and community partners around the state, showing we are all better when we are together and celebrating the unique value each UW campus brings to Wisconsin and the world. Whereas Ray prioritized protections for students and employees with new nationally recognized sexual assault and harassment protocols and vital mental and behavioral health support, and also enacted measures to strengthen relationships with the Wisconsin's sovereign nations, support Native and veteran students, connect justice-involved families through the Literacy Link pilot project, and improve the transfer planning process with the recent launch of a robust transfer tool called Transferology. And whereas Ray launched a series of student and faculty spotlights, giving the Board of Regents and others opportunity to hear firsthand the personal and moving stories of students pursuing their higher education goals in the face of adversity, and of faculty changing lives through innovative research, teaching, and service. And whereas Ray worked diligently to improve UW System's external partnerships, including strengthening relationships with state and federal policymakers and conducting direct outreach to the state's business community. And whereas Ray always conveyed his earnest belief in the value and importance of maintaining access to world-class University of Wisconsin system education, and he took particular pride in knowing that nearly 90% of in-state graduates in Wisconsin 5 years after graduation stay, and that Wisconsin is home to 2 national Research One universities and 11 outstanding comprehensive universities. And whereas in the final months before retiring, Ray provided extraordinary and unhesitating leadership during an unprecedented global pandemic, working with the Board of Regents and university leadership to keep students, faculty, staff, and campus communities safe while continuing the university's mission of learning, teaching, research, and public service. Be it therefore resolved that the University of Wisconsin System Board of Regents highly commends and thanks Raymond W. Cross for his accomplished tenure and distinguished service to the citizens of Wisconsin and the universities of the UW system. And be it further resolved that the UW System Board of Regents extends its sincere best wishes to Raymond W. Cross in his retirement and future endeavors.
I wish my mother were here. She'd be really proud. After all of those comments, Governor, she would wonder if, along with my freshman high school English teacher, is that really the kid I knew back then? Well, it's very humbling to stand here before you. I will try to keep this 3-hour speech to 2 hours, so bear with me for a minute, if you will. Thank you so much for those kind words. Good afternoon, members of the board, colleagues, and friends. So I officially retired on September 30th, so I've been retired for a little over a week now. I cannot say that I share Francis Whalen's retirement relief when he retired from Brown University in 1855 after 28 years as their president. When he heard the bell ring that signaled the opening of classes that fall, he told a friend, "No one can conceive the unspeakable relief and freedom which I feel at this moment. To hear that bell ring and to know for the first time in almost 29 years that calls me to no duty. Yes, I do feel some relief. The governor's assumed that, I suspect. When the alarm rings in the morning and I get up, I do not feel the unspeakable relief mentioned by Wayland, nor does a sense of freedom roll over me, but rather a sense of pride and comfort. I will explain why in a few minutes. I've organized my remarks around some of my broad, and I mean broad observations about communities within the university, about the purpose of a university education, about university leadership in light of that, and then some specific recommendations for the future of the university system in the state of Wisconsin. First, some observations about the university community. We often refer to the university as a community. Sometimes we refer to it as a community of learners. But today I suggest we are no longer a community. We are communities, which might be more descriptive because there are many of them within a modern university. We are a pluralistic society with multiple cultures, multiple identities, multiple agendas, and of course, our universities reflect our society. This places enormous strain on our ability to mediate and engage each of those communities effectively. Coexistence is often more likely than unity. At times, we even seem to be, at least partially, at war within our own so-called community. Unlike some, I believe that is actually good. It's really challenging for institutional leaders and university boards, but at a time when America is so polarized, so tribal, so hostile, and so fragmented, with few things around which we can be unified, the university offers hope because this is where the relentless pursuit of truth is job one, where we strive to bring agreements out of disagreements, to mediate differences in a civil and objective manner, where important primary values, both individual and societal, emerge from vigorous debate and dialogue, where opinions are challenged, dismissed, or validated through research, science, and data, and a place where intellectual freedom is greatly prized and carefully guarded. All of which make the university the perfect place for a pluralistic society to engage in the process of building a more inclusive, more humane, more engaged, more just, democratic society. Some observations about the purpose of a university of education. Today, as polls show, the public generally values education less than they did just a few years ago. I believe that is in part because we either have not effectively defined the purpose of an education, university education, or we've muddied it in such a way as to make it difficult to understand why we exist. Before we can address the declining value of higher education generally, we must internally, as leaders of a major university system ourselves, answer this question more clearly. What is the purpose of a university education? Why are we here? What is the purpose of a University of Wisconsin education? What distinguishes us? What is learning for? For only when we more crisply define our purpose can we craft the strategies and actions needed to fulfill that purpose. Ironically, it seems that as we strive to make education more efficient, more responsive to the interests of students, we have often ignored the most important question. Why are we here? Why do we exist? What are we trying to accomplish? Efficiency and student interest are technical responses and answers about means, not ends. And they offer no pathway to a consideration of our educational philosophy. Why do we exist? And as Postman argues, focusing on efficiency and student interest blocks the way to such a consideration by beginning with the question of how we should proceed rather than why we should proceed. Many of you have heard me speak about what I consider the four primary purposes of a university education. These are much more complex and nuanced than I will express here, but in their most simple form, they are, first, understanding oneself. Who am I and why am I here? Second, understanding how I fit into my community. How do I effectively live and work with others? Third, understanding my role in sustaining and improving a democracy. And finally, developing an ability to participate in the economy, to work or to create work and to be compensated, without which the first three become increasingly difficult. Unfortunately, too much of the American public believes the only purpose of higher education is to prepare graduates for a job or a career. But that should only be one part of our purpose. Additionally, at the UW system, we believe our mission goes beyond the personal development of these four purposes. We believe the university also needs to identify itself with the welfare of this state. That every person, every business, every community in the state needs to directly and indirectly benefit from the work of the university. We call that the Wisconsin idea, and that is what inspires our mission, our calling, and our purpose. Thus, I respectfully encourage this board to continue to support the broader role and purposes of a UW education and to regularly debate, challenge, and question, what are we doing to fulfill that purpose? We need to make our mission, our purpose, front and center always. Given the challenges our universities face serving multiple communities and disputes over our purpose, I think it appropriate that I should share some observations about leadership. I must start this with an observation from someone I really admired. In fact, I was jealous of this guy, Bart Giamatti. Bart Giamatti left the presidency of Yale to become the commissioner of Major League Baseball. I like baseball. I was jealous. Subsequently remarked that the job of a college president was a mid-19th century ecclesiastical position on top of a late 20th century corporation. So he's envisioning some priestly religious leader sitting over an institution, a modern business-oriented institution, which is a complex image if you can see it in your mind. An outspoken critic of Harvard's early president, Charles Eliot, who wrote under a pseudonym for fear of retaliation, suggested that the president, and let me read this, presides over a tropical jungle full of queer animals. Some run about seeking whom they may devour. Others sit quietly in corners, shrinking from observation, searching curiously for unknown things. It is a vast, magnificent, historic tangle. About all that the mighty gentleman can do, and of course in those days they were all gentlemen, and this is a great line, is to stand on a height above it and squirt perfume on the ensemble. Keep that in your mind. Yes, at times it seems all we do is squirt perfume, but I contend that some presidents and chancellors actually do that much better than others. Early university presidents like Charles Eliot at Harvard, Andrew White at Cornell, James Angel at Michigan, and William Harper at the University of Chicago, just to name a few, were able to move their unified communities through the sheer power of their position. The institutions they led principally served the elite. They were more unified in their understanding of the purpose of their institutions. Most believed, like Plato, the purpose of higher education was to produce philosopher kings. While these early higher ed leaders were giants, they led their institutions in many ways just like European rectors led their universities, in collaboration with their faculty. Eliot cautioned that the president should be an inventing and animating force and often a leader, but not a ruler or an autocrat. Their success, he claims, will be due more to power of exposition and persuasion, combined with persistent industry, than to any force of will or habit of command. Former President Eisenhower struggled with this greatly during his short tenure as president at Columbia University. A biographer observed that he could not command. He had to persuade. He could not rely on discipline. He had to rely on argument, discussion, and free will. Part of the heritage of the University of Wisconsin is deeply rooted in the leadership of Charles Van Hise, for whom this building is named. It was said that he, like Eliot at Harvard, was sometimes tactless, sometimes blunt, and apt to be ponderous, but he could be very persuasive. So persuasive that prior to his death in 1918, a Milwaukee paper felt he had transformed the university. Now listen to this. He transformed the university into a university that rules the state. Well, that's a unique perspective. He exercised authority in the context of faculty participation. He was a persuasive, persistent, and patient university leader, not an autocrat. Obviously, that is not always possible, especially today when institutions consist of so many different communities, have so many different agendas, and are not as unified in their support of the university mission as they were in the early 1900s. Yet the impact and legacy of Van Hise's leadership continues to cast a long and influential shadow on the university and on the entire state of Wisconsin. When you consider the formative leadership styles of early leaders on all of our UW campuses and the influence they had on our current operations, you gain a better understanding of how and why our system is so highly respected. Within that context, our chancellors today must navigate the complexity of our diverse communities and the complex challenges facing higher education, monitor disputes over our purpose, while trying to manage multi-million-dollar budgets, serve their communities, recruit and retain talent, manage the impact of a pandemic, and do so while under scrutiny from critics hiding from within what Eliot's critic called the historic tropical jungle. Yes, these are difficult jobs. Yes, the university needs to change and adapt. But leaders who bring the university through needed change should be encouraged to do so through persuasion in the tradition of Van Hise, and with patience in the tradition of Sorensen, and with persistence in the tradition of Zimfer in Milwaukee. University leaders that are persuasive, that are persistent, and that have patience, the 3 Ps I call them, will have a lasting impact on their institutions and their state. Thus, I encourage the board to continue to seek out universities leaders who can effectively lead their institutions and this great system to make wise changes using persuasion, persistence, and patience. Speaking of change, I also have some observations about needed change within the system. Some of these we have talked about, some of these we have been working on, some of these the governor is pushing to. First, I'll call it my 10 recommendations here. David Letterman is no longer on, so I'll assume most of you know who he was. First, the UW comprehensive campuses need to become more distinctive, more differentiated, and less duplicative. Second, the UW system needs to continue to work to consolidate and streamline administrative operational functions. Third, the UW system needs to create a unified strategic online educational delivery model. Fourth, the UW system needs bonding authority for non-state funded program revenue projects, and it needs to be able to borrow against projected future cash flows during times of crisis. Fifth, the distribution of tuition dollars within the reciprocity agreement with Minnesota needs to be changed. The current arrangement shifts significant Minnesota tuition dollars directly into the state's general fund, not to the university. Sixth, the UW system needs a comprehensive strategy to better serve underrepresented populations, not just in our state, but everywhere. Seventh, the UW system needs a rational tuition policy. Eighth, the faculty and staff within the UW system need a rational process for market compensation adjustments. Ninth, the entire UW system needs a modern, comprehensive, end-to-end integrated enterprise management software system that will allow more effective operation of the individual institutions and the entire university system. And finally, 10th, the state of Wisconsin needs to create a community and technical college system like almost every other state in the nation through the merger of the former UW colleges and the Wisconsin technical colleges. So I encourage the board to consider these recommendations carefully and to engage the chancellors, faculty, and staff in dialogue and debate around these ideas and recommendations. So now to the thank yous before I close. And I owe a lot of these. First to the board, I want to thank each of you, several of whom are no longer on the board, for placing your trust in me, for freely sharing your wise counsel, for holding me and the entire leadership within the university accountable, for sharing your ideas and dreams for this incredible university system, and for caring so deeply about the university, our faculty, our staff, our students, and our alumni. That means so much to all of us who strive to make this university better every day, that you really care deeply about this place. Thank you. Second, I want to specifically thank the board presidents with whom I've worked during my tenure as president. So Mike Felbel, who was president when I was hired, yes, you can blame him. Regina Milner, Don Bailing, and of course, Drew. My thanks to each of you for your counsel, your patience, your thoughtful encouragement. Each of you have contributed greatly to my professional growth and to the advancement of the entire University of Wisconsin system. To the chancellors, within the first year of my presidency, we had to fill 5 chancellor positions. I don't think it was because I was hired, but you never know. We hired some outstanding leaders. In the following years, we hired 3 more chancellors, and they too have been outstanding. I want to thank all of the chancellors for their support, their counsel, and their commitment to working together to build a stronger system. They are outstanding leaders. You can trust them to do what's best for their institution, all of them. I certainly will miss working with them, and I will miss their friendship. Faculty and to the staff. The UW faculty and staff on all of our campuses and within our extension operation are really outstanding. They work hard, they're creative, they're engaged, and they care deeply about this university. They are, in fact, the heart and soul of the university. They don't always understand administration. They don't always agree with our decisions, but they believe in the power of education, the value of the educational process. They understand the important role of the university. They believe in that role and in the importance of research. They believe in this wonderful state, Wisconsin, because it's their home, and they care deeply about students. I also want to give a special thank you to those who served in my cabinet and the wonderful staff within the UW System Administration, specifically Annie Morbel-Sosa, Rob Kramer, Sean Nelson, Jack Jablonski, Gary Bennett, Jess Lathrop, David Volz, Jeff Barant, Shanita Brokenberg, David Bruckhart, Quinn Williams, and of course, Nicole Schmidt. Thank you for helping me in so many ways and for all the debates, laughs, and fun we had working together, much of which was at my expense. I'm immensely proud of all that we have accomplished together. Thank you. You are the best, and I will miss each of you. I truly will. Of course, there is never a good time to leave the place and the people you love, but I am not leaving with a sense of unspeakable relief or freedom, as Francis Whalen suggested, but with a sense of comfort and pride. I participated in just about every morning meeting of the governor's COVID-19 operations group, and I believe the board could not have found anyone better to lead this wonderful system through these difficult times than Governor Thompson. He's doing an outstanding job. It's a pleasure to work with him. The leadership of the university is really in good hands. Finally, I would like to publicly thank my wife, my partner of 52 years, and my 4 kids. I would not be here without them, and I love them dearly. Further, I hope to spend more time with all of them, and especially with my 8 grandchildren. Look out, kids, Grandpa's coming. Hemingway thought that retirement was the ugliest word in the English language. Not interesting. I differ with Hemingway. There is no beginning without an end, no day without night, no life without death. Our whole life consists of the difference, the space between beginning and ending. It is what lies in between that we call life and experience. I believe that time and time again, we need to be prepared to keep bringing things to an end in order to feel the magic of new beginnings and make the most of opportunities. I certainly hope that historians will say that I did more than squirt perfume on the ensemble, but if not, I hope they at least will say that I did it well. With that, I bring my remarks to an end, and I bid you farewell. I wish you, this great university system, and this wonderful state, all the best. From my heart, I say thank you.
Well, congratulations again, President Cross. It's been our honor to be along your side. Before we conclude the open session portion of our meeting, do any regents have any communications, petitions, or memorials to share? Hearing none at this time, I'll ask all board members to stay on the line while we complete the roll call to move into closed session. Following the vote, please remain in this meeting room while Jess clears the line. Vice President Grebe, will you read the motion to take us into closed session?
I move that the Board of Regents move into closed session to A, consider a UW-Madison honorary degree recipient as permitted by Section 1985 1F of the Wisconsin statutes. B, consider emeritus status for the former UW system president as permitted by Section 1985 1F of the Wisconsin statutes. C, consider ongoing personnel matters as permitted by Section 1985 1F of the Wisconsin statutes. And D, consider strategies for crime detection and prevention as permitted under Section 1985 1D of the Wisconsin statutes.
Vice President Grebe, may I have a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Regent President Peterson?
Yes.
Regent Grebe?
Yes.
Regent Atwell? Regent Bechtel?
Yes.
Regent Fogos?
Yes.
Regent Cologne? Regent Delgado?
Yes.
Regent Hall? Regent Jones?
Yes.
Regent Klein? Regent Bledsoe?
Yes.
Regent Manydeeds?
Yes.
Regent Peterson?
Yes.
Staffel?
Yes.
Regent Stanford Taylor? Regent Walsh?
Yes.
Regent Weatherby?
Yes.
Regent Woodmansee?
Yes.
We are now in closed session.
Hey Jess, can I have your phone?